You're tuned in to Horror Slop, where the stories are rotting, truth is twisted, and sleep, forget about it.
Yeah, welcome to the pit. It's gross, it's creepy, and honestly, it's kind of my vibe. Hope you like nightmares, because tonight's tale, it slithers.
Straight from the darkest corners of Reddit. Real stories, real fear, and just enough blood to stain your soul.
So at least grab your bed sheets, so grab a flashlight, and maybe a therapist.
This is Horror Slop.
Alright, kicking things off with a personal favorite. It's messy, it's weird, and it sets the tone real fast. Story 1. Don't blink.
My mother had always been just a little peculiar. She liked doing things a specific way and always on one specific day. There was a routine she found herself in since I was just a child, and no matter the situation, the weather, or her mood, the routine would never vary. On Tuesdays, she would go to the fish market just before sunrise, continue to visit the butcher around noon, and finally buy all the other items we needed from the big grocery store just at the outskirts of our suburban neighborhood. On Wednesdays, she cleaned, or rather we cleaned. While Mum liked things a specific way and would usually go over whatever I did after I was finished, she did always accept my help. I suppose it was more for building my character than for an actual need of help. On Thursdays she did laundry. When the sun was shining she would hang the clothes on a line out in the garden, and if it didn't she would use the dryer inside. Either way, Thursdays always smelled like lavender softener. On Fridays, she baked muffins and cake and biscuits. With many spices and herbs, she would make her own creations. Those were the only days that smelled even better than Thursdays. My mother wasn't always entirely mentally stable, which is something hard to witness as a child and especially to admit. You want your parents to always do well and tell yourself that they are fine even when they're not. However, in most ways, she luckily seemed to be in control of her compulsions. It started on Monday when I woke up and found my mother in the living room watching something strange on TV. The sight of that was weird enough already, because normally she would never turn on the television by herself before evening, and now she was sitting there, wearing her flowery dress and high heels inside while watching something with complete focus in her eyes. "Good afternoon, honey. Are you ready for lunch?" she asked him. My father tilted his head. He could tell that something was wrong, but he didn't mention it either. Instead, he only lifted his briefcase a little and said, "I must go to work." But of course, my mother smiled. On Tuesday I didn't expect to see my mother when I got up. At this time she normally would be at the fish market to get the freshest catch. Instead, I found her by the kitchen table, nervously writing something down. My dad was sitting opposite her, having scrambled eggs and bacon. My mother smiled and nodded. "Good morning, kiddo," Dad said. They were both sitting together, having breakfast, and so I thought that things were back to normal again. He emptied his coffee and got up. "Time for work," he called out. Again my father and I exchanged a look of confusion. Well, the one of mine was the one of confusion, but his look seemed to be of distress. I nodded to silently tell him that I had things in control. On Wednesday I found her in the garden, digging up dirt. The exact opposite of what we normally would be doing on that day. She was digging a hole, big and wide, and I simply couldn't say what on earth she might need it for. Dad was gone before I had woken up, so I couldn't talk to him, but I promised myself I would do so tonight. Something was wrong with my mother. At first, I was worried, but I started getting scared. Both for her and of her. "Is something wrong?" my father asked that evening. It was difficult to find a moment alone. Mom always seemed to be somehow around. I hated that I had to get away from her to voice my concerns, but I was worried that she wasn't entirely stable. "She didn't do anything she normally does. And did you see that hole outside?" "Dad, I paused for a moment. I think she might really need help. I sighed in relief. Together we might be able to figure out what was going on and maybe he could start a conversation with her. Yes, thanks, Dad. I think that would be really helpful. Thursday I found Mum in the garden again. Normally that wouldn't be so strange as I would usually find her there hanging up the sheets. However, this Thursday it was storming outside. It had been raining all morning and it didn't appear as if it would end anytime soon. Not cats and dogs, fish, Mum turned around and laughed. And that is when we saw what she really was doing out there. She was hanging the chopped off heads of the fish Dad had bought on the clothesline. Mum. I could only bring out a whisper. Something is wrong. We need to help her. Tired and exhausted I stumbled down the stairs to find my parents both sitting in front of the television. I didn't even bother talking to them and went straight to the kitchen. On Saturday she did the most terrifying thing so far. A sight I will not be able to delete from my mind anytime soon. It started only in the evening. The entire day both my parents were acting normal. Mum even cooked and we sat around the table, talking and laughing. She did most of the talking and I could have sworn she was entirely herself again. I woke up from the sound of a loud clatter and immediately jumped out of bed. I had been a nervous wreck lately and it didn't take much to startle me. The sound was coming from downstairs and my initial thought was that someone had broken in, but then I heard my mother humming something from downstairs. Dad glanced at me. What the fuck? It's the middle of the night. Look Mum, I'm really sorry but dash. Just keep going straight. Follow the street, my mother finally said. Her smile had disappeared and her leg was shaking. My mother was trembling and in the dark light with the splatters of red paint on her face, I finally realized that I might have made a huge mistake. She opened her mouth but no words came out at first. She swallowed and then finally spoke. I am so sorry, my love. I didn't want to believe it. It made no sense. What are you talking about? My palms wouldn't stop sweating and my head started racing like crazy. This whole week I had been so focused on my mother I didn't notice that Dad only agreed to the things I was saying. He didn't do anything. And suddenly it felt as if something shattered in my mind. My mother had always been a little peculiar. Especially after my father passed away. Mum. That wasn't our home, was it? I gulped. How did we end up there? She looked at me, a reflection of my own fear and confusion. I have absolutely no idea. It must have somehow lured us in there, and made us forget.
Still here? Aw, look at you. Brave little meatbag. Too late to back down now. Next story's already watching.
There's going to be a clown at Jake's party. My dad said. When we got to Jake's house, there was something going on. The kids were running around the backyard and jumping in the bouncy castle, but the adults were standing around in silence, their eyes darting back and forth across the yard while some of my aunts and uncles walked in and out of the house periodically. It was like they were all waiting for something to happen. As I jumped in the bouncy castle along with the rest of my cousins, I noticed a movement in the bushes near the gate that led into the backyard. I continued to bounce, trying to get higher each time in order to get a better look at whatever was there. Finally, I saw the clown appear from behind the bushes and watched as he unlatched the gate. I stopped bouncing and tried to maintain my balance as I watched the clown step into the yard and close the gate behind himself. I pushed my fingers through the mesh in the bouncy castle and pressed my face against it, staring at the clown as he scanned the backyard until his eyes landed on me. He stared at me for a few seconds and I stared back, not really knowing what to do. Nobody else seemed to have noticed him yet, and my cousins continued bouncing around behind me. He was short, and he wore a curly, rainbow-colored wig. His face was white, and it seemed like his skin was naturally that pale. It didn't look like paint at all. His lips were normal size, but bright red, and he had a giant, round red nose. His eyes were dark, so dark that I couldn't distinguish the pupil from the iris. He had 2 black lines that started above his black eyebrows and ran down his eyelids to the tops of his cheeks, which appeared to be inflated with something. They were round and protruding, with a pink blush on them. His skin was smooth, like porcelain. He wore yellow polka-dot pants that were held up by red suspenders, and a white shirt with giant red buttons down the front, and red ruffles around the neck, chest, and sleeves. He wore shiny red clown shoes, and he carried a gift bag in one hand. When it came time to open presents, we watched as Jake unwrapped countless video games and action figures, along with a few clothing items. Once he finished opening the last gift from a family member, the clown walked up to Jake and handed him the gift bag he had been carrying around for the entire party. I saw his mom sigh in relief, and Jake turned the book over in his hands, looking at it. It was a small, hardcover book with a glossy dust jacket that had a drawing of a beach on it. Jake thanked the clown, and it walked away from him, through the gate, and away from the house. When I was 10, the same thing happened, and although I begged my parents to let me see the book, they declined. The night of my birthday party, I snuck out of my room and saw my dad go up into the attic with my book. I tried to find it a few times after that day, but he had hidden it well, and it was nowhere to be seen. I didn't see the clown for a couple of years. All of my cousins had passed the age of 10, and none of them were old enough to have their own children yet. And then about 12 years later, my daughter Wendy had her 10th birthday party. My wife knew about the clown, and we had already seen it appear once before at Jake's twins' birthday party. We had prepared Wendy and had given her the same warnings my parents had given me: be nice to the clown. I watched as she thanked him and he clapped his hands together and then continued to walk around my backyard. She took it gently and slowly opened it, digging around the tissue paper until she pulled out the book. "Thank you," she said, smiling at the clown. She didn't seem to mind that it was being taken, she seemed glad. It was the same as all the other books I had seen, hardcover with a glossy dust jacket that contained a drawing on the front but no title. The first page was blank, but the next page was where the story started. There was a drawing of the girl on the cover, wearing a party hat and holding a pile of gifts. Under that, it read, "Today is Wendy's 10th. How happy is she? She got every gift she wants, even things she doesn't need." And then, from beyond the backyard fence, comes the best guest of them all. A funny clown, here to have a ball. This clown loves to party. And it loves 10th birthdays too. He will never miss a chance to show up where he's due. The next drawing was of the clown in the center of the page, surrounded by black. The clown runs around the yard and pulls something from his pocket. Not a balloon, not a magic handkerchief, but something big and sharp and shiny. I ran to the door and threw it open just in time to see everyone running away from the clown. He was back, and he stood right by the fence with a butcher knife in his hands. On the ground next to him was my cousin Paula's child, Trevor, face down in the grass. I scanned the backyard, looking for Wendy, but she was nowhere to be seen. I looked for my wife, and I spotted her running towards me and into the house. "Where's Wendy?" I asked her, grabbing her arm. "She jumped the fence a while ago, she's fine. We need to hide." She dragged me inside with her as the screams continued. A few more family members made it inside and we hid in the kitchen and the living room. After a while, the screams died out and I slowly got up, opening the door and peering out into the backyard. "What's this?" she asked. I waited for her to finish reading the book. Once she was done, she tossed it onto the counter. "What the fuck?" she hissed. "Did he plan all that? Is this supposed to be some stupid joke? Did this happen to everyone else?" she asked. "I don't know. Our parents never let us see the books," I replied. I made my way to the attic entrance in the hall and pulled down the ladder. I slowly made my way up, each step creaking as I stood on it. When I reached the top, I flipped the switch and the lights turned on, illuminating the attic enough for me to see. I dug through countless boxes and moved old decor and furniture around until I found it, the book that had been given to me on my 10th birthday. It had been hidden under the cushion of an old chair. I pulled it out and looked at the drawing of a house, with a single light on in one of the windows. I opened the book and found a similar engraving on the inside cover that read, "Happy 10th David." I turned the pages and began to read the story, ignoring the pictures. David's birthday was a blast, and his gifts were all so fun. But don't be sad that it's over, the fun has just begun. Years go by, and the clown sees Dave again. It's now his daughter's 10th birthday, and today the fun will end. The final drawing in the book showed an empty bed in a dark room, with a window that was wide open. I stared at it for a second before it hit me. I tossed the book aside as I got a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. Something was wrong. "Wendy!" I shouted. She was gone. Her bed was empty, and her window was wide open.
Anyway, let's lighten the mood with something fun and... Nah, just kidding. It gets worse. Hit it.
Lucy. "Daddy, there's a man in the baby's room." Such sinister words from the sweetest voice. In a flash, I ripped the covers from my body, waking my wife in the process, then raced down the hallway, past the pictures hung on the wall, and into the bedroom on the end. With a simple flick of a switch, I was exposed to my 2-month-old son's room, the mint-colored walls, the boxes of gifted diapers from the baby shower, a basket of plush animals, a tub of pacifiers and wipes. But behind the crib where my son, Noah, was sleeping was something appalling. An intruder crawling through the window. The intruder craned his neck when the light blasted on and alerted him of my presence. It was then when I noticed the knife. The man was large, with greasy long hair and an unkempt beard. He smelled of body odor and that sour, putrid smell of vaporized drugs. I leapt into action before he could achieve a sturdy footing or leverage the knife to his advantage. I skirted the crib where my son still slept and removed a heavy bookend from the bookcase, then, as unsupported baby books tumbled off the shelf, I bludgeoned the intruder in the arms as he flailed and teetered on the windowsill. After the intruder took several missed swipes with the knife, my aim became focused on his head. After my weapon made contact with his skull a few times, he withdrew into the backyard, lumbering awkwardly around our flower bed before hobbling over our fence and disappearing into the dark street. I picked up Noah, who thankfully, was still sleeping and oblivious, and held him firmly against my chest. "What?" she laughed. "Now," I demanded, loud enough to vocally project my fear but unintentionally lifted Noah from slumber. She phoned the police as I flipped on every light switch in the house, especially the exterior ones, and cruised through the rooms with Noah on my hip, doing my best to calm him. It took 2 laps through the living room, but eventually he was calm enough for my wife and I to talk after her phone call. "It's okay. What happened?" "Somebody was trying to break into the house through Noah's room. I forgot to lock the window after we painted his room. Remember, we opened it for ventilation. I'm so sorry, honey. Something could have dash. You're right. I paused for a moment to consider an answer, then looked at my curious-eyed son. Yeah, Noah's crying woke me. She went to the kitchen and I heard the coffee pot being washed. I took Noah to the hallway and propped his body up on my side so he was eye level with the photographs that lined the hallway. I showed my son a picture of a 6-year-old girl with blonde curls that flanked a grin between chubby cheeks. That's Lucy, Noah. She's your big sister.
Alright, quick break before our next story. Let's check in with our resident spooky dude. Hey, you ever smile, or is your face just stuck that way?
I smiled once. The sky bled. A child vanished. Never again.
Okay, drama. Maybe next time just try a dad joke.
Knock knock. They never made it to the door.
Wow. Fine, stay moody. Anyways, back to the darkness. This next one's got teeth.
You fucking creep, she screamed. Ugh, you know how freaking long it will take me to get back home? Yes. Not even gonna say anything. You play it all nice and smooth with that fake picture of yours, saying you're going to meet up with me here, and now you don't even have the balls to speak up. You pathetic loser. Another customer of the small dinner got up. He was an older man. His attire screamed blue collar. His eyes wandered from her to me. They weren't compassionate anymore, no, now they showed nothing but contempt. Well, young man, you've got some explaining to do. I still stared at the glass of water. My throat felt like it was clenched shut. Hey, I'm talking to you, he yelled at me. I didn't, I started but broke up. Too embarrassed to even speak, eh? Yes, sorry mom, it's gonna be at least another hour. No, I'm fine, just some weirdo. No, I didn't see Anna today. What? No, it's alright, I'll just take the train. Yes, I'm on my way. The blue-collar man still didn't let off. Finally, I pushed myself past him, and awkwardly made my way to the door. What was that all about? I heard a young woman whisper to her friend. How the hell would you see something like that? I didn't even see his slap coming. He stared down at me, his eyes furious. Linda, did you tell the boy? And no, of course not, why'd I ever dash? Ugh, shut up, bitch. I still lay on the floor, my face hot with pain. I listened as Dad got up and made his way to the kitchen. I jerked away in my seat. The old lady opposite me looked over before she mumbled something to herself. Why'd I remembered something like that now, damn it? Now where am I wondered. As I stared outside and read the name of the station, I sighed. It would still be another half hour before I'd be home. I checked the time on my phone again and saw that it was already 11 in the evening. Shit, and I got an early shift tomorrow. Work was hard that day. I'd barely gotten 5 hours of sleep, and it was the busiest time of the year. I slumped through the warehouse, sorting shelves and repackaging products with my eyes only half open. The hell's wrong with him? Does he ever say a word? One of them asked in a hushed voice. Dunno, think he's mentally challenged or something, another voice chimed in. It took me about 5 minutes to find one. She was pretty, long blonde hair and had a shy, somewhat playful smile. She was a bit reluctant to answer. It was always the same. I sent her a few more of my rehearsed lines, boosting her confidence, soft-soaping her and pushing more lies down her throat. She was an easy one, it took me no more than a few minutes to get her to agree to the date. I fell back on my bed as relief flooded my face. I checked the phone once more. It was still a few hours before I'd got to go. Guess I'll set the alarm and take a nap. Wasn't like I had to dress up or prepare for the date. Dad hadn't always been an asshole. When I was a little kid, he'd genuinely been the best. Then he started to drink. When I found out he was beating Mom, I became a target as well. For years the abuse went on until I learned to be smart enough to keep quiet. No, talking about it wasn't helping anyone. When I became a teenager, and after Mom's death, Dad and I became close again. It was by necessity if anything. As a teenager, I couldn't just move out. See her over there? Now that's my type of woman, alright, he said to me, pointing at someone ahead of me. Well, hello there, young lady, need any help with those bags? Dad approached her and reached out a slimy hand. The woman stared at him, and I saw her face contort by a mixture of surprise and disgust. Now come on, don't be like that, babe, why don't you just let me help you with those, It's alright, I'm Dash. In a moment, the lady tore her bag free from him and hurried down the road as far as she could. Another slap in the face. Man, I was so close to getting some, he cursed. I saw her enter, saw her look around. The place was half empty. Her eyes noticed me. At first, she looked away, but then her eyes focused on me again. I lifted my face and gave her an awkward smile before I looked away again. I'm Damien, I mumbled. Hey. Say something. Is this a freaking joke? Work was slow the next day, allowing me to steal away every once in a while. For a few minutes at a time, I scanned profiles. I noticed her instantly. Short brown hair, cheeky smile, tank top. Once I arrived at the small restaurant I'd chosen, I decided on a window seat once again. The waiter came again and again, and by the third time, he started to get pushy. In a low voice, I ordered a drink. I scanned the street, but there was still nothing. I opened my phone and sent her yet another quick message. Hey, where are you? Sorry, Romeo, went out with a few friends today. Where are you going? I asked her. I opened Google Maps in a moment. Timbers, a bar in the freaking center of town. Fuck, I cursed once more. It was going to be one of those nights. Sir, if you don't plan on ordering anything, then dash. Without even looking at him, I got up and left. Once I stood in the open street, I opened the app once more, staring at her picture. I was antsy when I entered the bus again. I couldn't let it end like that. This was not how things were supposed to go. It took the bus almost half an hour before it made it to the city center. The whole time I was nervous, shifting in my seat. Every once in a while, I stared at her picture, taking in as much as I could about her. Before the bus had even rumbled to a stop, I was at the door, hitting the stop button. Now where the hell is it? I pushed my way back to the bar and ordered myself the cheapest cocktail they had. Then I made my way back towards them. I watched him as he whispered in her ear. I saw how he rubbed her upper arm and inched in closer. She giggled, yet when he tried to kiss her, she turned away and whispered something in his ear. She was cheeky. The guy, however, grinned, and when I saw that, rage exploded in my mind. Hey, watch out where you're going, he yelled at me and pushed me aside. My hand collided with his face, and I spilled my drink all over his cloth. I pushed myself upwards and mumbled an excuse. Before I'd so much as finished it, the guy's fist hit me square in the face. There was an explosion of pain, and I could taste blood in my mouth. "The fuck are you doing, you goddamn freak?" Another guest was there, kneeling by my side. "Hey, are you alright? You want me to call an ambulance?" "Didn't know that guy was a freaking psycho," he said, and pointed at the guy taken away by security. Soon after, the barkeeper approached me, asking if he wanted me to call the police. I nodded. It didn't take them long to arrive, and with the help of the buff guy and the bouncers, we gave them a detailed description of the man. "You need us to take you to a hospital, sir," one of the officers offered. "Tell you what, if you'd ruined my date, I might have kicked your ass too." "She's gone, booked at the instant that guy went all out on you." Looked mighty scared. On my way home, I took out my phone once more to look at her picture yet again. For the first time the whole evening, I was able to relax. I could see her sitting in a taxi on her way home before she went to bed.
That last one tasted like fear and poor decisions. Let's see what the next bite serves. Hope you're hungry.
I used to be a pilot. Did that for many years and loved every second of it. I tell ya, there's nothing quite like soaring through the skies and breaking the sound barrier for the first time. You might crap your pants a little, but it's all just part of the experience really. Now unfortunately, the type of work I did was above top secret, and for all of our safeties I cannot go into any further detail on what I actually did, or who I actually worked for. One day, I was out on a calcified reconnaissance mission in a certain area where I should not have been. I'll apologize here for the vague details of certain things, but you gotta understand, the things I'm about to tell you are beyond top secret. They would kill me 10 times over for uttering a word of it, so here's to hoping that doesn't happen. Anyways, the mission was going as planned, when suddenly my instrument started going berserk on my dash. Air pressure inside the cabin just plummeted, and the speed and fuel consumption gauges looked like they were playing ping pong with each other. Everything began to rattle like crazy, and my alarms erupted into a symphony of irritation. Next thing I know, I see this bright light soar past me at an ungodly speed. The shockwave it produced was so violent that it shredded the hull of my craft. In a split second, I went from casually flying along, to suddenly regaining consciousness as I plummeted headfirst towards the ground at terminal velocity. I managed to pull my chute before I splattered, but as I touched down, I almost wished I hadn't. There I was met by an awaiting entourage of at least 24 men in winter camo suits and masks. They all pointed their weapons at me and screamed in a language which I recognized as English. I was not going to be saved. The people I worked for had never said it, but it was always well known that if ever you were captured, then you were pretty much on your own. With that in mind, I had no real incentive to keep my mouth shut once they started interrogating me. It may seem cowardly, but I was not about to be brutally tortured for a former ally which would never come to bail me out. Yeah, the government says they don't torture people, but trust me, when they really want to know something, there's no tactic too extreme. And they really wanted to know something. They transported me away from my initial interrogation place, into a secure facility somewhere nearby. I was blindfolded the whole time, but from the rumbling of multiple vehicles, sounds of doors sliding open multiple times, and the distinct feeling of my stomach dropping, I could tell they had taken me somewhere deep underground. Soon after that, I stepped off the elevator and they removed my blindfold. Their leader was a guy with a stern face. Thick gray beard, and eyes that looked etched from concrete. He wore a black suit, with some symbol upon his heart pocket that I didn't recognize. He stepped in front of everyone and outstretched his arms while staring me in the eye. "Welcome to your new home." An ever so slight grin slithered onto his face as he said it. I glanced down the dismal gray hallways, which seemed to stretch out further than I could see in multiple directions. They lead me down the hall on the right, past dozens of locked corridors and rooms before ushering me into a cell. My handcuffs were removed soon after, and the door slid shut behind me. The same man that had welcomed me to the facility then approached the window and pushed the intercom button. "We appreciate your cooperation, Mr. Blue. I don't believe there is any reason why our time spent together has to be unfriendly. I apologize for all of this, but you must realize that this is a necessary precaution we must take. I hope you understand." I took a moment, then nodded back to him. "Wonderful, we will have dinner sent to you soon. If you require anything, then please notify one of the guards outside of your quarters." And with that, he and his little entourage turned and strolled down the hallway. That was my very first night in the facility I eventually came to know as FEZ. I don't think it's the official name, but I heard several personnel at the base refer to it by that acronym over the years. I still don't know exactly what it stands for. Forbidden Enclosed Ziggurat. Forsaken Evil Zoo. Forced Ejaculation Zeal. Fabulous Elf Zombies. The best I could really come up with was Fortified Experimental Zone. It makes the most sense too, all things considered. At first it wasn't actually too bad. The staff was nice, they cooked great food, and there was plenty to see around the base. Although every once in a while, I would hear the screams just barely echoing through the vents. They interviewed me probably 100 more times after that, and were especially interested in the craft which I was piloting. The craft in question was one of our own top-secret technologies, but unfortunately it had been blown to smithereens by whatever that light was, so I couldn't tell them much about it. It took years of incarceration there, but eventually the staff came to trust me almost as much as they did their own comrades. We would laugh and joke with one another, and soon enough we became what some might even consider to be friends. The base itself was absolutely colossal. They always blindfolded me during transport to any location, but one time I caught a glimpse of the buttons in the elevator. There had to have been at least 50 of them on that panel. I remember the first time they showed me one of the lockdown blocks. There were guards posted at every cell, and I heard some very strange noises emanating around me as we traversed the halls. I thought for sure they were about to show me some horrendous beast from the depths of hell, and prepared myself accordingly as the howls of unseen things echoed throughout the halls. You ever seen anything like her, Mr. Blue? All I could do was shake my head slowly as I watched the young demon child stalk about on the other side of the glass. They found her in the woods outside of Whitehorse with a freshly disemboweled man. She was eating him, and appeared unaffected by the sub-zero temperatures. I suddenly felt like vomiting, but I said nothing, only stared back at the unusually gruesome little girl. What the hell was she? Unfortunately, I never was told anything else about her, and I doubt the personnel knew much more anyways. They came to show me a lot of very strange things over the years. A giant brownish-orange-haired primate that walked upright and seemed to respond to facial movements. A humanoid-shaped being that was only detectable via infrared equipment. A golden chest that would instantly kill anything that touched it. A 10-foot-tall creature wrapped in vines that emitted bouts of radiation and blended into environments with perfect camouflage. A monstrous fish at least 80 feet in length frozen in nitrogen. Various abhorrent creatures that I'm guessing were the results of relentless genetic tampering. I had never seen anything like it. All of the monstrosities housed there, and the secrets buried in their possession. They also asked for my advice on a certain paradoxical phenomenon that had plagued them as well. I could almost see the fear dripping from their eyes as they relayed case after case of the recorded incidents, and it was clear, although not said, that they had no idea what the cause was. Unfortunately, neither did I, as it was the first I'd ever heard of the bizarre phenomenon. I told them honestly that I didn't believe my former allies were responsible, but I don't know if that made them feel better or worse. Kevin and I got to talking back in his quarters one night, as the rest of the crew retired for the evening. He shared with me a bit of his brandy, and we were content to just chat as friends late into the night. He told me a lot about himself that he had never mentioned before. He showed me pictures of his wife, and his son that had been taken from him. Kevin admitted his son had died in a car crash a couple years back, while his wife passed 2 years later of cancer. It broke my heart to hear that, and I felt sorrow for my dear friend of some 30 years. Kevin was in his early 50s, but you'd never know it with the enthusiasm in his voice. It was during that conversation, Kevin ended up mentioning something I found particularly interesting. He told that he believed that if an alien species existed, and were advanced enough to traverse the galactic canopy and reach Earth, then they would obviously be quite intelligent. He said he didn't believe in any of the Hollywood depictions of doomsday aliens hellbent on destroying humanity. He thought they'd be a lot more subtle than that. That'd just be a waste, and no species that fancies themselves as advanced beings would do something so brash, at least I hope they wouldn't. He chuckled slightly and shot me a knowing look mixed with a unique intrigue that almost glistened in his gray eyes. Even if they thought we were destroying our own planet or something, why would they care? There are trillions of other planets in the Milky Way alone, they could pick any of them if they wanted natural resources. I chuckled to myself, almost sensing where the conversation was headed. Exactly. They'd want to study us. Learn how we operate, how we organize and how we live. Kevin's hand motions turned eccentric, and I saw his access badge jostle around his neck. He took another sip of brandy and continued. He paused from his enthused monologue and wiped the steam off his glasses. I just sat back, content to let him continue, as I found it fascinating that he could know so much. You're not really from Russia, are you? The sudden accusation caught me off guard, and I felt my stomach drop like a lead weight. I didn't say anything, and Kevin just scoffed. You look so authentic too, but there was one thing you missed. One thing that you just can't fake. He looked me deep in the eyes and fell silent. He didn't have to say it, for I already knew what he meant. The eyes are impossible to truly fake. Mr. Blue, do you wish to go home? I nodded after pausing to think for a moment. Kevin looked over his weapon, and primed it for use. I hope your allies can forgive us. Without another word, he flashed his security badge and the locks on the door gave way. He motioned for me to rise and follow, and so I did. Here, take this. He reached out his hand, and held something which I had not seen in decades. The old radio from my craft. I took it, and he and I met eyes as the elevator door opened. It was back to running after that, but a few minutes of it and we had reached an underground parking facility. Kevin quickly unlocked a nearby vehicle, and the two of us hopped in as he fired it up. The engine roared to life, and Kevin accelerated through the lot. A moment later and we exited the underground facility, and I saw my first vision of the night sky in over 4 decades. You can contact your friends with that radio, right? His eyes flashed to me as he slid onto the main road and away from the compound. Take this too. He handed his long-barrel pistol over, and I hesitantly took it. He and I then met eyes for one final time. You don't belong here. You don't belong in a cage. I don't know where you come from, but I want you to see the ones you love again. His eyes began to water, and he jostled his neck before looking me in the eye one final time. I always have, and I always will. Thank you, Kevin. I then held out my hand and he grabbed it tight as we shared one final moment, before I ventured into the blizzard. The terrain was brutal, unrelenting, but eventually I managed to find the river which Kevin had mentioned. By that point, all of my pursuers had long since gone silent. I followed the river, and found the town, and soon after the man known as Mr. White. He was a kind man, and gladly invited me into his house to avoid the agents. It is there that I have been ever since, awaiting my allies' arrival. Kevin was a smart man, brilliant even. If you've managed to make it this far, then I'd like to think you are someone like him. Brave, curious, and with an almost innate sense of wonder that cannot be satiated. It was Kevin's belief that the beings he knows as aliens are already here. That instead of murdering humans as is often portrayed in stories, they would blend in. Take keen interest in human culture, society, and art. Write books, poetry, and music in hopes of connecting to something truly extraordinary. Something that reminds them of themselves. If Kevin is right, then maybe one day, you'll even stumble upon such a story for yourself. Maybe you'll think it nothing more than a work of fiction to entertain you for a while. Maybe the author of said theoretical story would seem like nothing more than your run-of-the-mill internet user. He probably wouldn't just come right out and say it, because that would be entirely too corny. He would probably just leave you the pieces, and hope that you could understand the truth for yourself. Maybe you truly are like Kevin, drawn to mystery and prepared to entertain the fantastic. Maybe you'll just dismiss the implications of the words before you because you don't dare believe something so outlandish, because in the end truth is not the problem, belief is. Maybe someone will understand who, or more importantly what I really am. Maybe it will be you.
Something's still listening, and it wants more. Next story. Just don't say its name.
You know that meme about how presidents and governors, after getting elected, look super shell-shocked and stressed the next time they make a public appearance? Like the first thing that happens after you come into power is that you're pulled into a room and told all of the secrets of the world. Well, turns out it's true. As a matter of fact, it's a VHS tape. Now, there's something you should know about me before I continue. I'm a wimp. I'm meek, anxious, and generally restless. I'm a chronic rule follower. There is no part of me that wants to dig up secret documents and uncover the truth about what happens at the highest levels of government in our country. It was nighttime at the office. I'm known to be a bit of a chronic workaholic, and there was something I really wanted to get done before the week was over, so I was working later than usual. I went to print a document on what I thought was the printer in my immediate vicinity. The notification on my computer showed that my document was being printed, but I didn't hear any noise or paper coming out from my local printer. I checked the name of the device I selected, and it looked like I'd accidentally clicked on a printer that was being used on another floor. I sighed. In any normal circumstances, I probably would have just forgotten about that mistake and reprinted the documents on my local printer again, but our general management here is quite stringent on us making sure that all confidential documents are accounted for. We are not allowed to share department-specific documentation to other departments. Fuck it, I thought. I looked up a map in my inbox showing the locations of all of the company printers. Turns out, I'd accidentally clicked on the printer named Prince Charming on the 7th floor. Ha! Funny name. Off I went. I really should have just let it be. I didn't think much of it and started walking off, until I heard the door open. What? No, sorry, I think you have the wrong. I don't care why you're late, just get in here, grab a plate of snacks and sit down, we're starting soon. Put your phone in the bag, electronic watch in the bag, and anything else on your person that can be used to record audio or video, he responded hastily. I put my phone and my watch in the bag. I meekly tried to butt in with another, "Sir, I'm not Mr. Boskowitz," but he had already pulled me into the room at this point. He closed the door and walked to the front by the TV. I thought about making a break for it, but I decided to just see it through at this point, hoping deep down that whatever was happening was as inconsequential as my job was. "Alright, I just need to do a final run-through before we get started," the man at the front said. "I know you all read through the emails and signed your releases. I just wanted to recap some ground rules. You're allowed to get up and grab another snack, but beyond that, we want you to pay full attention to the tape once it starts playing. If any of you need to go to the bathroom, we strongly urge you to wait until the presentation is over. If you absolutely have to go, we will pause the tape and one of us will escort you. There is water in the corner by the snacks, cups are right there as well, and goes without saying, but any discussion of this presentation to folks who do not have top compartmented clearance is a breach of your terms of employment, a breach of your non-disclosure agreement, a breach of your multiple signed releases, a breach of the U.S. Criminal Code in the state of /redacted/, and a breach of the conditions laid out by the Committee for the Protection and Preservation of Human Consciousness. They started dimming the lights. Fuck. It felt like I had missed any window of opportunity. One had to leave. Too late. That committee name he highlighted sounded way above my clearance level. I took a deep breath. Those water cooler conversations I'd had with my coworkers were starting to float to the top of my mind, but I quelled them. There was probably no need for panic. It was just a stupid government meeting, right? But wait. That insignia looked strange. Like something was off. I scanned it. Presidential libraries. That same eagle. Those same stars. Weird. This time, there was a navy blue hand on the left shoulder of the eagle. Did they update the logo? Before I had time to ruminate on it too much, the tape cut to a logo I had actually never seen before. The video cut to a room that looked similar to the Congress floor, but with some strange differences. Seats were much more spaced out, the podium looked like it had seen better days, and the whole room looked to be on a pretty steep incline. Everything was in black and white. It looked like there were about 50 people in attendance. It was hard to make out the faces. Everything looked very dated, like the video was from the 40s or the 50s. It really felt like I shouldn't have been seeing this. None of this was meant for my eyes. He spoke. I felt adrenaline. Fuck, we had made contact with extraterrestrial life. This was the truth. Maybe, like the saying went, the truth would set me free. Before I outline the decision taken by humanity, I want to, from the bottom of my heart, thank the brilliant representatives from all of the nations of the world, who came together to ensure that this decision was taken with utmost responsibility, care, and appreciation for our human species. I am aware that this was not a unanimous decision. The tape returned to a now corrected angle of the speaker at the podium. His eyes were visible. They looked strained. Like they'd seen multiple versions of hell. To the nations who still disagree, he continued, I thank you nonetheless for accepting the majority decision. May this moment, which will be held in secrecy throughout the rest of time, be appreciated as a critical milestone for human civilization. Tonight is not a victory. It is a somber moment. However, we were faced with two options. Extinction. Or accepting the agreement. We made our choice, and I believe time will show that this was the right decision. What was this? I hereby announce that we accept the agreement provided by our special guests who have chosen to go by the name /redacted/. The intergalactic species known as /redacted/ will allow humanity on planet Earth to continue to populate, grow, and innovate. In return, all governments of the world will honor the promise. He needed to spit it out. What the fuck was this agreement? We honor the agreement that /redacted/ hold the right to visit planet Earth on a recurring basis. They will be allowed to consume, for the basis of nourishment, a majority of the human population on planet Earth. After every visit, the remaining humans on Earth will be expected to breed and grow to capacity in time for the next visit. We acknowledge that we will maintain a parallel history which will be shared with our world's population, to ensure that humanity stays motivated to continue existing as a species. This parallel history may suggest that mass extinction events are the results of man-made folly, as opposed to the work of external forces. For the first time, my fight or flight response was actually flight. I wanted to escape, but I didn't know what I'd even be running from. The last visit by redacted was approximately in the year 1346 and it lasted 7 years. We will continue to honor our parallel history about this event. Fucking hell, I shouldn't have stayed late at work. I should have made my identity clear from the very beginning. I knew that I wasn't supposed to see this. And while the process of consumption is a painful and lengthy one, we respect the trade-off that comes with the preservation of our species. We also acknowledge, as part of the promise, that substitutes for human life in the form of clones, should we discover that technology in the future, or other living species, will never function as viable alternatives for nourishment, the speaker continued. I didn't need to know this. This whole thing was way too specific for me. Our final major acknowledgement, as part of this agreement, is that we accept redacted as the Great Almighty, as the entities we will now refer to as God. God, as an interstellar species, has revealed itself to us, and thus, the continued existence of redacted is now the true priority of the people of our planet. We are blessed to play a part in the continuation of God. In God we trust. Amen. We bless our visitors with this gift. A performance of the national anthems of all major nations of the world will now commence. Audio of a very loud backing track of the Star-Spangled Banner started playing from the video as my stomach sank. The tape showed footage of the choir singing on top of the track. Not sure if it was because they were scared for their lives, but I could really tell they were singing their hearts out. As they sang, the camera continued to pan over the blurry seats. Fast forwarding. The men at the front continued fast forwarding through the tape. It looked like they were skipping through performances of the other national anthems. The fast forwarding went on for a while. Every small while, it looked like a new choir group was entering the Congress-like room to sing a different national anthem. On and on the tape went. I had to fight the urge to pass out. One of the men at the front of our room, standing next to the TV, started speaking up. For some weird reason, I couldn't look away. The last few fast-forwarded moments of the tape remain burned in my memory to this very moment. They were pandemonium. The attendees were sitting in their chairs, frozen, shivering, crying. The people in the various choirs were running around the rooms in fast motion, as blurry spots started covering them and ungodly things started happening to them. Fuck. Why didn't I look away? If ever there was a fucking time to follow orders. It felt like the whole thing went on for longer than it should have. The agreement has been ratified by redacted. Thank you all for attending. The final shot of the video is the full room. The committee members in their seats, shivering and crying. The dismantled and bloodied choir members strewn about the room. The blurry seats with blood smeared on them. The lights in our room turned on. The rest of the night was a blur. The men at the front of the room told us it was best for us to sit for an hour to digest the information. No discussion about the video was allowed to take place. When we were ready to stand, we were allowed to leave and go home. They gave us some pointers on how to accept the information over the coming weeks. Things like taking long walks, exercising, watching a sitcom, etc. As soon as I left the building and got in my car, I just drove. For as long as I could. I would stop for gas, then I'd keep driving. I'd stop again. Then I'd keep driving. Again. And again. I'm holed up in a hotel now. I'm just glad I could get this off my chest. The funny thing is, all I can think about is the length of that stupid tape. While I can't confirm, I feel like if it were played straight through without fast forwarding, it would have only been 3 hours. I wonder if the 4-hour tape rumor came from the fact that we all needed that extra hour to digest the information. And now, you're probably wondering, why don't I name the species that is going to spell humanity's doom throughout the rest of time? Why am I calling them redacted /? Well, as the self-appointed leader of the Committee for the Acknowledgement that we should have just chosen extinction, I don't feel the need to honor our captors by calling them by their name. If I don't see you again, Reddit, I appreciate the water cooler conversation.
You feel that? That weird pressure in the room? Yeah. That's the algorithm. It knows you're watching, and it gets real cranky when you don't feed it. A simple ritual helps. Click the little thumbs up, tap subscribe, say its name 3 times into your phone mic. Kidding, probably.
Engagement appeases the darkness. You know what to do.
Good, human. Now, back to the horror.
Who's the worst, most despicable person you can think of? Jeffrey Dahmer, Ted Bundy, Luis Garavito, Pol Pot. But that's a good thing. They were relatively easy to take down. The bad news is that every once in a while, special cases will arise. In our circles, we call these individuals the void people, or just the voids. Individuals so far gone that they can hardly be considered humans anymore. The cause behind entities like these? Well, I wouldn't know. Nobody really does. Maybe they were born with that latent potential. Maybe they underwent some obscure supernatural transformation. Maybe their experiments gone awry. Aliens from another planet. Shit, maybe they're literal demons from hell brought here by some fool who just had to conduct some fucked up ritual. Who the hell knows? The only detail that matters is the fact that they exist. And dealing with them is more than a bitch. I'm sure you're familiar with the concept of max security prisons. Places where drug kingpins, terrorists and prolific serial killers etc. are sent. The places meant to contain the worst amongst humans. Well, those are a joke compared to where the voids are kept. At a pair of undisclosed coordinates built in the underground of a tiny island somewhere deep in the Atlantic, there exists a prison unlike anything you could imagine. Let me emphasize this a bit further. The individuals that require being held there are not merely criminally insane. They are criminally absolutely out of this universe fucking bonkers. Of course, you wouldn't know about any of this. Why would you? The government would probably sacrifice 1,000 children before they divulge a single detail about the place to a person without high enough clearance. But you know, that's just how they are. However, everybody understood the futility of that protocol. Those guards were getting slaughtered in seconds, regardless of the void they went up against. Maybe minutes if they're really skilled. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure why any of us regular guards are stationed here at all. Bureaucracy, I guess. Who knows what the government's thinking? My day started out more or less normal. I was part of the unit guarding somebody named Jim Henninger. Well, that was his real name. Doesn't evoke a lot of fear, does it? That's why he had to call him something else. Since he used to be some psycho surgeon or something, we've dubbed him the Surgeon. Really creative stuff, I know. Of course, he's just 1 out of 32, and comparatively speaking, on the tamer side. What I didn't enjoy was the blaring fucking alarm and deafening, repeating automated voice blasting the word breach that went off right as I was about to take my chili out of the microwave. There had only ever been one major breach in the chasm's history, in which 8 voids had broken out nearly simultaneously. It was also apparently the only time that TFVNH had to step in. This was all around 12 years ago, long before I became a guard myself. The aftermath of that? I don't have high enough clearance to know. But I'm willing to bet that it was nothing fun. Well, what the hell are we supposed to do? Somebody asked. They only got shrugs in response. Except for Saw-sun, that is. I fucking hated Saw-sun. The guy seems to believe that his life's an action movie and that he's the invincible main protagonist. Are y'all pussies or what? He screamed at the top of his lungs, with a stupid grin plastered across his face. We never get any fucking action. Let's fucking go. Before anybody could stop him, he picked up his rifle and swung the door open like the giant fucking dumbass he is. Rough. I couldn't understand why they were so delusional. We watch creature features and slasher flicks with the inherent understanding that we're watching fiction. A type of visual catharsis for our inherent fascination with the dark and grim. It's not supposed to be real, and we have no idea how to act once we find it standing right in front of our faces. Not even us so-called elite agents. Like I said, I'm not sure why they even bothered keeping guards in the chasm to begin with. A guard I recognized as Fenton turned around. I didn't even know where I was going, so I didn't realize that I'd wandered into the level right above the weight room. Despite the alarms, he was in the middle of overhead pressing what appeared to be an ungodly amount of weight when one of the escaped voids wandered onto the weight room floor. It was Luz, standing at 6 feet 2 inches, 188 centimeters, 205 pounds, 93 kilograms. Like all the other prisoners, the guy was a complete mystery. His mostly bare body was comparable to that of a bodybuilder's, save for the hundreds of gnarly scars decorating his skin. The more disconcerting part of his aesthetic was the fact that he only had one half of his face. The other half consisted of his exposed skull, with some kind of red, electrical current running through his cranial bones. He had that same current running through his hands, which allowed him to savagely electrocute whatever organic material he touched, quickly rendering it into a pile of steaming, black mush. I guess that my fellow agents didn't bother reading up on the prisoners they guarded, because Bronco never stood a chance. It didn't matter if you were superior to Luz in terms of strength. One touch and you were gone for. The only practicable way to take him down was by using ranged weapons. And even then, that task was easier said than done. Bronco grunted like the dumb meathead he is, before grabbing an Olympic weightlifting plate and chucking it like a frisbee at Luz. It connected, seemingly shattering his ribs. But it wasn't nearly enough to take him down. As soon as he rushed forward, the fight had been decided. Bronco attempted to tackle him, a mistake so horrible that his whole body began twitching as his skin made contact with Luz's fingertips. The electricity spread through his giant frame, causing his vitals to shut down within seconds. In no time at all, he was reduced to a heaping mass of scorched flesh on the floor. He didn't even have time to scream. I could see the respective faces of my stunned colleagues drop as they witnessed what they likely deemed an improbable outcome. Idiots, that's what they were. But truth be told, I was also an idiot for even bothering to stay. Not long after, the sounds of cracking bones and heavy footsteps began emanating from an adjacent walkway. In congruence with his name, his entire head, save for a single eye, was wrapped in rusty barbed wire. He wore a decrepit, old leather jacket and jeans, complete with a large pompadour on top, like an 80s, or whatever, high school delinquent. Everybody's main concern was the weapon in his hands, a large, iron bat wrapped in the same barbed wire on his head. If you didn't die from the impact, unlikely, the subsequent infection would surely get you. And don't ask us why we didn't take his weapon away when we contained him. We did. But somehow, someway, he got it back. These things really can't be helped. What the hell is going on? I thought. Breaches happened, sure. But it seemed as if every single fucking void had somehow escaped. How is that possible? In any case, I couldn't afford to think deep into it at the moment. I nearly had a heart attack as I began pushing through the crowd. Even though I was implicitly certain of the fact that no other location within the chasm would have been much safer, I was still being driven ahead by my fight-or-flight responses, away from the immediate threat. It was kind of funny. I'd been through so many life-or-death experiences that my reaction to adrenaline coursing through my veins had been dulled. Well, it sure as hell got invigorated today. I guess that I wasn't paying enough attention to my surroundings, because right as I was about to climb a staircase, I felt an oversized arm slam into my chest, knocking me over in the process. I looked up to see another guard, Cade, leering down at me. Sure, I was happy it wasn't one of the voids, but Cade wasn't much more pleasant. Still, I didn't practice hand-to-hand combat just to be ragdolled by some asshole. I slammed my elbow down on his wrist, which managed to loosen his grip. I followed up with a knee to the stomach and then attempted to strike his neck. "Nice moves," he said, in an obnoxiously sarcastic tone. He took his palm and rammed into my chin, nearly causing me to black out. In the meantime, Wirehead was getting closer. But there was a glaring issue. I had no idea where I was going. The exits were surely going to be blocked off from the inside. It was Sandhu. I picked up my radio and isolated his transmission. "Yeah. Where are you, man?" "Block C, got lucky and found something weird. It might save us though. Come on." Obviously, there wasn't much information there. But it was better than running around aimlessly. Thankfully, Block C was fairly close, so I was able to make it without running into another void. Diaxec was comparable in appearance to something you'd see in the corner of your room during sleep paralysis. A hulking, faceless figure wearing a sweeping black robe that jerked around in unsettling motions as he, or she, who knows, walked. Obviously, that wasn't something I was looking forward to. As I looked ahead, I could see some unfortunate guards already getting caught in his death zone. In an attempt to avoid a similar fate, I turned the opposite direction and began running. And then I nearly shit myself. His name essentially told it all. A man wearing a dirty and tattered SS uniform, with a cracked gas mask covering his face. In one hand, he gripped his signature Kampfmesser 42 blade that was inexplicably unbreakable, no matter what the hell we tried doing to it. In the other, he held a flamethrower hose connected to a massive tank on his back, which sprayed out some kind of scorching, black flame that would supposedly yield pain beyond comprehension if you were ever to come into contact with it. You could say that I was stuck in between a rock and a hard place here. The only other way out was taking the plunge over the rail in front of me, onto massive scrambling bodies 50 feet below. "Let's fucking go," he whisper-shouted, before pulling me in. He closed the door behind him, plunging us into complete darkness. "What the hell is this place?" I asked, hardly expecting a detailed response. I could hear the Nazi beginning to spray his flamethrower from out in the corridor. I suddenly wondered whether or not Diaxec's power would apply to other voids. In any case, it was better not to be in such close vicinity to them, so I followed Sandhu. He led me down some kind of hidden hallway. The walk was rather long, maybe around 8 minutes, and I eventually found myself in what appeared to be some kind of surveillance/control room. "I guess this is beyond explaining," I said. I took the suggestion, letting my eyes drift over to the screens. What I saw would have been normal, in any other scenario. Each monitor was streaming a different section of the prison, all displaying the utter carnage that was going on outside. The guards were being ripped to shreds. Some tried fighting. Most were running. But what they had in common was the fact that they were all being utterly obliterated by the voids. It was Wirehead and Luz, staring each other down. That's when a rather obvious revelation hit me. Of course the voids weren't only going to kill the guards. They were sure as hell going after each other as well. That much should have been apparent from the beginning. I grinned, feeling some kind of obscure hope creeping into my system. That hope was only bolstered when I saw the Nazi utterly dousing Diaxek with a relentless wave of black flames, with the latter struggling to move forward as a result. But of course, my hope was merely transitory. I wasn't gonna kid myself. Even if only one void was left standing at the end of everything, that just means it'll be the strongest one out of them all. And we can't stay in here forever. At this point, my future is uncertain at best. Maybe I'll get lucky. Probably not.
Still with us? Good. That last one was just the warm-up. Let's go deeper.
10 years ago, I taught sophomore creative writing. 2 student stories still haunt me to this day, by Red Grin. What the hell am I going to do? But there is something about them, they are so interconnected, and there is something so raw and beautiful about them. I have a strong affinity for interesting student writing, and it'd be a shame to let the flames of these stories be extinguished. I remember visiting her. She had an old, wooden rocking chair that faced the window. Outside was nothing but flat, fields of green. The green would eventually fade, and when it snowed it was carpets of white for miles and miles. I'm not sure which season Grandma Rosie liked the most. She didn't do a lot of talking. She mainly listened to her radio, and always one station, 89.1. Grandma Rosie leaned in close, and I put my ear to hers. I lifted up the cup of her headphone and listened. There was only static. "Listen closer," she said. "Soon, they will come," she said. "They will come to take me away." This freaked me out a little, and I went home. I told my mom and dad about what happened, but they didn't think it was that weird. "How do you know this?" I asked. "This is our secret," the walkie-talkie buzzed. I again told my parents that I was worried about Grandma Rosie. They were very dismissive. In my headphones I heard the distant organ, and I heard the screams that seemed far away, but sounded like they were getting closer. The screeching of the metal began, and then I heard a voice. "Open your eyes." I noticed the closet door. It was wide open. The static of 89.1 hissed from my headphones. Grandma Rosie died 2 weeks later in her sleep. Her time had come. And I was done fooling around with legends and superstitions. Kate's flash fiction. But I know what I saw. A young boy, a ritual, and death. Death itself. A black death with a clutching grip, an entity that surrounds its victim, dragging a companion to its secret and eternal lair. But I was joking. Joking all along. Which made it okay. I slowly back away. A tiny voice, squeaking. Static echoing in the small room. Nothing but static. I close the door on my way out. Won't let it out. Here I had 2, seemingly intertwined stories, Jake's more traditional folklore story, and Kate's personalized flash fiction, focusing on emotion, regret, and secrets. Perhaps I'd been swimming in urban legends too long, or maybe I'd been the victim of too many horrendous student essays and stories to count, but I couldn't shake the notion. A few days after Halloween, I kept Kate after school. I wanted to know more, specifically, was she the Abby character in Jake's story, and was she confessing to visiting the grandmother in her own piece? I pulled out Kate's flash fiction, and I asked about how she wrote it. What was her inspiration? She shrugged. I guess it's avant-garde. I was just experimenting with ideas. Did you like it? I nodded. It was an interesting piece, I told her. Have you ever heard of 89.1? Kate asked me. I started to speak, but couldn't. A few words sputtered out, but were interrupted by Kate's laughing. We so got you, Mr. Patrick, Kate laughed. But something didn't feel right. I had drinks with a veteran, freshman English instructor, me the first-year teacher in a new town, and he the wily, old mentor. I told him about the assignment and the stories Jake and Kate turned in. He laughed, and thought about it a bit more. I told him good job, and to keep writing. Still, the situation seemed amiss. Like I was missing part of the act. Was it possible that these two were so committed to screwing with me that they wouldn't even speak at school? Or maybe they were dating and didn't want anyone else to know, so they played it cool in the hallways and in class. They were 15-year-old kids, after all. That seemed reasonable. But it was keeping me awake at night. Nothing else mattered. I taught during the day, and I obsessed over the stories in the evening. News, sports, and current events faded to the background. The real world slipped away. I pushed forward. Armed with a couple of possible last names, thank you, school records, I called senior citizen homes in the area. I was trying to track down my mom's old friend, Rosie, I told them. Each phone call followed the same script. The receptionist went through the files and found nothing. No one there by either last name I had. In a last-ditch effort, I spent a lot of time alone in my bedroom, listening to the static of 89.1 with my eyes closed and the door slightly ajar. I'd hone in on the static, and I'd listen deeply and intently for the chimes of the organ, the harsh and troubled screams in the distance, and the clinkety-clink of the metal chains. Sometimes I'd think it was there, and I just had to focus a little harder. And I'd sense a presence in my bedroom about to creep out of my closet, the dark mist waiting to drag me away. I wanted it to come, because I wanted this story to be real. But it didn't come. I shrugged. Abby was Kate, I told him. It was all part of the game. I wonder, he thought aloud to himself. He laid it out for me. I spoke with the school administration, they contacted the authorities, and the police had conversations with Jake and Kate. It went nowhere. It didn't matter that Abby had lived across the street from Jake. It didn't matter that we had words on paper. They were just stories, the kid said. Only stories. Complete fiction. Jake had no grandparents in a home, anyway. They were sorry if they'd scared anyone. They were Halloween stories, after all. And pretty ambiguous stories, at that. I left the teaching profession soon after that. I walked out of the school holding my small crate of supplies, and Kate smirked at me with a knowing glance through a first-floor window. I haven't seen her since. I didn't take much with me, but I did take the photocopies of the stories. I pull them out occasionally and relive the past. And sometimes, late at night, I'll get a fire in my belly and a burning desire to travel back to that small, Wisconsin town. Maybe Grandma Rosie was a great aunt that Jake's family referred to as Grandma, or maybe it was an elderly family friend. Maybe I missed something about the missing girl, about 89.1, about Kate's intentions. Perhaps I can try the ritual a few more times, just to see what happens. It was 10 years ago. And I'm probably the only one that thinks there's a shred of truth in those stories. I'd be wasting my time. But it still keeps me up at night, the slim chance that it's all true. And oftentimes the idea of it is something I contemplate more than what really happened to Abby and the grandmother in the story. If it is true, why did the kids write it all down like that? I don't have a good answer. I'll never have one. I suppose that, just like me, they really just enjoy a good story. 10.
Need a break? Too bad. These stories don't wait, and neither do we. Next one's worse. In the best way.
Removed by Reddit on account of violating the content policy, /help/content policy.
Sleeping yet? Didn't think so. Next story's up. And yeah, it's worse. You're welcome.
I didn't understand what was going on at first. It was 8 in the morning when everyone was either hurrying to their jobs or God knows where the pensioners go so early. But then I made it to the front of the crowd, and my eyebrows shot up. In front of me, a couple of men in their 40s were trying their hardest to push the door open, only they couldn't. The entire frame of the iron door was welded shut. I could see the metallic seam running along the frame. "Push harder, I have a doctor's appointment in an hour." One of the old women shouted at them. "Are locked in here?" One of the women asked in a tone that was bordering on hysterical. "I can't stay here, I need to get to work." "Everybody needs to get to work." The man snapped back at her. "But the door is locked. What else do you want me to do?" There was a pause of silence as everyone considered the meaning of his words. Somebody locked themselves in with the rest of the tenants. But why? The woman was obviously humiliated by such a development and gave me a death glare, but thankfully, she didn't say anything else. A doorbell buzzed behind me. Someone from the crowd was trying to reach the neighbors that lived on the first floor. "I'll crawl out through their window, that's how." The man replied. "Don't be ridiculous, all of the windows on the first floor are grated," somebody else shouted, but the man didn't listen. It seemed that more people joined him as I could hear numerous fists banging on the door. "Hello? Can you help me with the door? I can't seem to open it." We suddenly heard a voice coming from outside, from beneath the welded door. The people started talking all at the same time, trying to explain their situation to the man, or to ask him to call for help, or to demand him to explain himself, but he never had a chance to answer their questions. The crowd fell silent. The terror in the man's voice was so genuine that no one had any doubts that he indeed saw something horrifying. "Let me in. Please." He screamed again, desperately hoping to muster the strength to open the door. The concern for his fate swept over us at the same time. It was probably what our ancestors felt when they watched one of their own being chased by a lion. "Help him, someone." Somebody from the back of the crowd shouted. Nobody moved. There was nothing we could do. The iron door that protected us from the creature outside was also separating us from the man. He was so close to us, and yet he was dying alone. It was at that moment that we heard them. The sirens. Old and rusty, they were coming back to life after decades of sleep to fulfill their purpose, to warn people of an incoming catastrophe. The years of slumber did not do them any good. They started out sounding low, but with each second, as their mechanical voice cords were stretching and warming up, they were getting louder and higher, until the familiar sound that everyone had hoped to never hear was drowning out everything else. Right? Part 2. S.
You're still tuned to Horror Slop. Frequency unknown. Stories endless. Let's spin the next nightmare.
I played a text-based adventure game on the dark web. I Can't Undo the Things I Did, by Wendigo Roar. I spend a lot of time on Reddit. I'm sure you do, too. I'm on a lot of video game subs, and in particular ones about text-based games. I'm talking games like Zork. I wasn't alive when Zork came out, but I got really into it in high school. When I made it to college, I took an even deeper dive, playing all the sequels, all the knockoffs, and every shitty game that people had cobbled together and released online. I had to refocus a bit, adding work on top of college courses so I could afford my shoebox apartment, but eventually I came across a post called Apartment Complex. Not a super promising name. The screen went blank, then a text box opened up. Why not, I figured. I typed in AY. More text appeared. I grabbed a 6-sided die off my desk and rolled it. 3, I typed. Y, I typed. Intriguing choice. Thad and Sherry start to get hot and heavy. When they are naked on her couch, Thad starts to try penetrating her, but Sherry stops him and says he needs to use a condom. Thad complains that it doesn't feel as good. Sherry tells him that it's more important that both of them are protected from STDs. She's feeling a little tense. Thad calls her a whore and a tease and throws his clothes back on. Sherry cries as Thad goes to storm out. Unfortunately, Sherry's door won't open. Thad checks, and the door isn't locked, but it refuses to open. Furious, Thad storms back to where Sherry is still laying naked on the couch, crying, and begins to scream at her. Would you like to continue making decisions for Sherry, or try another tenant? /1/ for Sherry, /2/ for new tenant. Intriguing choice. Thad continues to scream at Sherry, who can't stop crying. She's afraid he might hit her. Thad hasn't decided if he will or not, but plans to let his anger and lack of concern for Sherry as a human being guide his behavior. If things continue as they are, Thad will most likely beat Sherry to the point she will need to be rushed to the emergency room. Should Thad be stopped? /y/ / n /. Why, I typed. Damn, I thought. Looks like I'm not going to finish this game with a decent score. Keep plugging away though. I rolled the die again. 5. I typed it in. Not investigating would be boring, so of course I typed in AY. Intriguing choice. Clyde gets off the couch and follows his nose to the kitchen, where a heavy propane smell is blasting out of one of the burners. He's familiar enough with gas leaks to know that he's one spark away from Clyde Flambe. Should Clyde leave, or keep sucking up the fumes? /1/ Clyde leaves or /2/ Clyde stays. Intriguing choice. Clyde exits his apartment and heads down the stairs to the front door. When he makes it to the floor below his, he sees that the stairs are blocked by fallen ceiling tiles. There are stairs on the opposite side of the floor. On the way, he would pass 2 other apartments, which would likely have phones to call the fire department to handle the gas leak. Should he stop at the first apartment /1/ the second apartment /2/ or take the stairs /3/? What the hell, I said under my breath. And then there was a knock on my door. Hey, anyone home? A voice called from the other side of my door. My name's Clyde, I live on the floor above you. My phone isn't working and my apartment smells like gas. Can I borrow your phone? I sat as still as I could, making no sound. On my screen, I saw more text pop up. Should Clyde keep trying the first apartment /1/ try the next apartment /2/ or take the stairs on the far end of the floor /3/? Whatever, asshole. I know you're home. I hope you enjoy being a piece of shit, Clyde said. Then I heard his footsteps go down the hall. The apartment building I'm in is new and pretty well insulated, but I could faintly hear knocking on the apartment down the hall from me. I knew a college girl lived there. Hopefully she isn't home. Text started filling up my screen again. Suddenly, I heard a smash from outside. I tore my eyes to look at my front door, but it was still solidly shut. The sound had come from down the hall. I looked back at my screen. Clyde used his shoulder to slam the door, and it popped open. He stepped in, calling to whoever was in the apartment. Walking further in, he saw a shocking sight, a man on the ground, his neck slashed open. A ceiling tile on the ground next to him. On the couch, a completely naked young woman. And, covering everything, a massive splatter of blood. Clyde grinned. Are you going to help Sherry / leave your apartment and go to hers / or do nothing while Clyde murders her / /1 This was so messed up. I couldn't just let someone mutter my neighbor, even if I barely knew her. But I was terrified. I got up, ran to my kitchen, grabbed the biggest knife I could find, then went to my door. I took 3 deep breaths to steady myself, then I unlocked the door, threw it open, and ran out into the hall. I looked over to where the other apartment was, and I could see where the door had been broken in. I ran as quietly as I could over there, and when I reached the door, stopped short and stuck my head around the door frame to see what was going on. Unfortunately, I couldn't see what was happening from where I was. I crept in as stealthily as I could. The first thing that hit me was the bitter stench of blood. Then I got close enough to see what was happening. Sherry was on her back on the couch, Clyde leaning over her with his hands around her throat. She was scratching at him, but the blood made everything slick and it looked like her nails were sliding around more than doing damage. I ran up to them and drove my knife straight into Clyde's back. He roared and whirled around. "You bastard," he yelled, and dove at me, tackling me to the ground. He started pummeling me with his fists. There was little I could do to stop him. With each blow, I felt myself getting weaker, my vision going darker. When I got back, words were flashing on my screen. "We hope you play Apartment Complex again."
Anyway, let's lighten the mood with something fun and... Nah, just kidding. It gets worse. Hit it.
On Saturdays, Grandma took me ferry spotting. We'd catch the 9:36 train to Houston Station, cross the underpass, and then spend hours wandering through Ravenscroft Forest, hand in hand. A circle of fat, spongy mushrooms surrounded the tree's exposed roots, and she insisted anybody who stepped inside the fairy's ring was liable to become trapped in their realm. All I wanted, more than anything, was to catch a glimpse of these magical creatures. My eyes stayed glued to that dark hole until Grandma began packing up, at which point I'd beg her to wait just 5 more minutes. No matter what the two of us did together, rummage through thrift stores, practice hopscotch, even homework, Grandma and I always the best time, so you can imagine how devastating it was to find her on the kitchen floor, her eyes rolled back in her skull. She entered hospital on June 3, 2015. Again and again, the adults in my life promised she would recover soon, but while staying with my Aunt Christine, I tiptoed downstairs one night and heard her speaking over the phone. When we next visited, Grandma breathed through a respirator, her arms purple from all the ugly bruises. At the fairy tree, I set the chocolates outside the circle and said, "I don't know if you're listening, but I really, really need a wish to come true. Please make my grandmother better, please." I sat there with my legs crossed until dusk. By then, there'd been zero sign of any fairies, and what's worse, Aunt Christine would now be absolutely furious with me. Angry at the stupid fairies, I shouted, "Thanks for nothing," and then kicked the head off the closest mushroom. "Then, what are you?" "I'm a girl." That was silly. Didn't anybody tell you fairies are make-believe? Are not. Are too. My hands balled into fists. Well, either way, I paid for them, and you're just shoveling them into your gob. After a loud burp, she said, "Got any more?" I shook my head. And with that, she ducked inside the hollow. "You could at least say thank you," I shouted. Just then, Grandma's warning echoed through my mind. Was this how changelings lured children into their realm? This hardly seemed important. Overhead, storm clouds were brewing, and the sun had almost set. Not wanting to become lost overnight, I started back toward the trail. "Hello?" a male voice eventually shouted back. "I'm lost, please help," I shouted, racing past a thick grove of trees, in the direction of the sound. I'm not sure why I suddenly got spooked. Perhaps it was the sour stench that accompanied the approaching silhouette. Or maybe the harsh, grating quality in its voice, which I could now hear clearly above the groaning air. In any case, I got this powerful sense I didn't want to be seen. Then, out of nowhere, something brushed my arm. Terrified, I opened my eyes, saw the girl from earlier, a forefinger pressed against her lips. We stood motionless while heavy footsteps lumbered by, the harsh voice melting into the gloom. Once it completely tapered off, the girl whispered, "Let's go," and dragged me along the trail. For 15 minutes she guided me through a labyrinth of swaying trees and hedges. On the far side of the lake, we approached what resembled the front entrance, except the train tracks above the underpass were missing. Unconcerned by this, the girl pulled me through a narrow archway, into a cobblestone path pinched between two buildings. Still catching my breath, I said, "The overpass." "The what?" "The train track." "Oh, that. It doesn't exist yet." I stared at her, dumbfounded. "You've traveled back in time," she said like this was no big deal. In response to my bemused expression, she added, "When you climb inside the tree you travel through time." "You can't." "Why? Isn't there a way around?" I asked, still struggling to process these events. 1955. Certain they'd never help Grandma now, I crouched into a ball, knees hugged against my chest, and sobbed. "Oh. Well, I can take you back to the tree tomorrow." "What am I supposed to do until then? I don't know anybody in 1955 and you ate the biscuits meant for the fairies." "Why does that matter?" While I buried my face in my lap, the girl said, "Why don't you come home with me? You can hide out there until morning." Looking back, she most likely offered because of the guilt over my unfortunate predicament. Aunt Christine would worry sick about me, but there didn't seem to be much choice. I stood brushing snot off my chin. "Fine. You owe me for eating the chocolate anyway." Already starting down the alley, she pointed at my jumper. "Okay, Evelyn, people aren't used to those kinds of clothes in 1955, and nobody else knows about the tree, so we have to stay hidden. Also, Grandma would flip a lid at the thought of another mouth to feed, so I'll sneak you around back." "No. She's nice." "Better than mine then. You hungry?" A smiling lady in a green apron appeared and handed over a loaf of bread, and after they chatted for a little while, the woman returned inside, then Rosie hurried over and tore the loaf in half. "Here. It's not as tasty as chocolate fingers, but it's still pretty good." In 1955, the town felt more like a sleepy village. Within minutes we'd reached the outskirts, then a winding dirt road carried us past farmers' fields filled with cattle and sheep, toward a small, white cottage. Our shoes squelched in the dirt as we tiptoed around back, toward a window at chest height. A few seconds later, this rough, gravelly voice started up. From the sounds of things, Rosie landed herself in hot water by returning home late. To guard against the howling wind, I rubbed my arms until the window swiveled open, and then my guide pulled me inside a cramped bedroom with a simple wardrobe and tiny bed. Black grime crawled up stone walls, and the only clue a girl slept there was a red-haired doll resting on a wicker chair in one corner. "Soon as I finish my chores tomorrow, I'll take you back to the tree," Rosie said. "You can borrow my old clothes so we don't have to sneak around." Old lady snores, harsher than a chainsaw, blasted through the wall while she laid out some sheets and a mat along the floor, since one girl could barely fit in the bed, never mind two. After we tucked in, I looked up at Rosie and whispered, "How come you know so much about this time travel stuff anyway?" Propping herself up on one elbow, she took a deep breath and started into the story. At the sight of this, her grandmother stood wielding the cane like a sword. Immediately the ground gave way, then she landed flat on her chest. "Hungry?" the lady asked, as she offered Rosie chocolate fingers. After they ate, Rosie announced she wasn't going home, ever. Anytime beat the past. As a compromise, the lady promised she'd leave more treats. "Next time you're hungry, scared, or sick of your grandma, come back here. I'll hide more chocolate for you. But Rosie, don't wander too far. If you wind up trapped in the future, that would be very, very bad." But whatever the case, she never saw that old lady again. "Wait a minute," I replied, excited. "My grandma left treats when we went for picnics. Did the lady say her name?" "That's her," I said, a little too enthusiastically. In the next room, the snores ceased, briefly. "But we can still visit, right? Here, gimme your finger." Our pinkies interlocked. "There. Now it's a special promise." After quietly worming my way out the window, I waited while Rosie's grandmother barked orders. Stepping forward, I said, "I've got this. Grandma and I played all the time." Rosie told the girls I was her cousin. They remarked on my strange shoes and, whenever I used words or phrases not common in 1955, shot each other funny looks, but in the end, none of that mattered once I beat them 3 times over, blowing 1 raspberry apiece. In order to reach town faster, Rosie taught me scudding, which was when you hitch a ride on the back of a carriage. One milkman carried us half a mile before he heard our stifled laughter and ground to a halt. The two of us took off giggling, him shaking his fist. At mid-afternoon, back at the cottage, the tongue-lashing Rosie's grandmother dished out reached all the way to the end of the lane, where I waited. And I waited. And I waited some more. "Sorry, Grandma grounded me," Rosie said, finally reappearing. "I had to wait until she took a nap." Dusk had already crept along by the time we reached Ravenscroft. Rosie stopped and held up her little finger. "Pinky swear. Pinky swear." As we stood there, fingers interlocked, a branch snapped, somewhere close. Then a sour stench drifted toward us. Our heads whipped in the direction of the sound where, 30 feet ahead and draped in shadows, a towering figure regarded us from the murk. For a few seconds, branches shivered and shook as the wind whistled through the lacings of branches. Then, suddenly, Pat the Hat charged forward. Rosie's hand clasped tight around mine. She dragged me toward a dense wall of trees, where we turned sideways so that we could slip through a narrow gap between trunks. Pat charged after us but got stuck halfway through, clawing at the air. "Get back here," he snarled, some real venom in his voice. Sweaty and exhausted and unable to run any longer, we hunched behind a bush and listened helplessly, those footsteps drawing ever louder, closer. With one hand against her knee, still breathing heavily, Rosie pointed up ahead. "The tree's that way. I'm gonna distract him so you can make a break for it." "Rosie, no." About 20 yards out, she scooped up a twig and snapped it in half. After that, the gloom swallowed my new friend up. I couldn't even go after her. Dead leaves shuffled as our pursuer changed direction. When there was only groaning wind, I charged in the direction Rosie indicated, quickly finding myself staring down our hiding place again. I went in circles, hopelessly lost. Exposed. Soon Pat would find me, then I'd never see Grandma or Rosie again. Nobody would ever know what happened to the girl who ran away from the hospital. But then, there came a flutter of wings, close to my ear. My head whipped around. Up ahead, beside a fern, I thought I glimpsed insect-like wings, glistening in the pale moonlight. They disappeared with a shake of my head. Seeing no other choice, I raced in the direction I'd seen them, barely aware of the thorns slicing my neck and wrists, ducked beneath interlocked branches, and then found it standing dead ahead, the fairy tree. I'd made it. Those thick winding limbs heaved up and down like great exhalations as I bolted along. After a long, deep breath, I shouted, "Hey, I'm over here, you-hoo," until a bush at the edge of the clearing rustled around. Then, I dove inside the hollow, my left foot raised like I was taking the stairs 3 steps at a time. Like before, the world gave way. Rather than topple forward, this time I crouched low, nimbly slipping through the bough. Behind me, Pat tumbled out of the hole into the dirt. The scream that escaped my mouth was so loud Rosie must have heard it back in 1955. My legs carried me past the ivy wall, furiously working at top speed. Despite my efforts to shake Pat, he stayed hot on my tail, his hands swiping at the back of my neck every few seconds. The blackwater hit like an ice bath. Bubbles spewed from my mouth while I twisted in every direction, blindly searching for the surface. Before I even managed that first breath, 2 hands covered with wet, fingerless gloves wrapped tight around my throat. Beams of lights pierced the trees while dogs barked wildly. It was a search party. My search party. As the tremendous pressure around my throat eased, a brutal coughing fit set in. Someone threw a blanket around my shoulders and then carried me toward the entrance, a crowd gathering behind us as word spread the missing girl had been recovered. Aunt Christine was standing by a police car, her eyes puffy and red. At our emergence from the forest, a flurry of kisses was unleashed upon my forehead. When they wheeled me to her side, I leaned forward and asked if she could hear me. A pair of glazed eyes rotated in my direction. Then, feebly, Grandma lifted her right hand, the baby finger curling. "Rosie. Mary. Rosemary." Together we sobbed, our pinkies interlocked, until her head slumped against her shoulder. Nurses rushed in. One wheeled me away while another pressed down on Grandma's chest, but there was nothing to be done. Her time had come. A week later doctors discharged me, dismissing my story as a coping mechanism, or a hallucination induced by swallowing lake water. The first thing I did was catch the train to Houston Station, meaning to warn Rosie about the future, about what lay in store. But as the train pulled up, my heart dropped. The forest had vanished. In its place, JCBs and steamrollers plowed through huge mounds of dirt, pyramids of horizontal logs piled up here and there.
Still with us? Good. That last one was just the warm-up. Let's go deeper.
Have you ever walked through a hallway where everyone knew that you didn't belong? I kept my head down and my ears up as I traveled through the central corridor of the children's burn unit of St. Francis Hospital. Even though I passed by a sign that proudly claimed it had been donated by the Friends of Crespwell Academy for Superb Children. Nope. This place didn't exist. I'd been working at St. Francis since July, and I knew every square inch of it. Maybe there was a wing that I had missed, right? The people were off as well. There was a heavy-set nurse with frizzy hair who stared with distrust as I passed. I encountered her 3 different times along the same corridor, despite the fact that she could not possibly have moved ahead of me. Another nurse, frail and nervous-looking, tried to hand me a bag of blood. When I refused, she threw it angrily on the ground, where it splattered. I kept walking without looking back. My list of rules had been very clear about the fact that I was to continue in a straight line for 47 minutes if I found myself in this impossible place. I glanced down at my watch. It was 3:09 a.m., 6 minutes since I'd arrived in this impossible corner of hell. The employees became more insistent as I walked on. "Doctor," a resident yelled at me as he jumped out of a room, "the patient is coding. We need you, stat." "Doctor," he screamed, "you're killing her." I wiped away a tear as I continued forward, ignoring the unholy scream that came from the room. I'd heard enough patients to know what a death wail sounds like, but I had no choice. I entered a clear patch of hallway and checked my watch. It was 3:22, I'd been walking for 19 minutes, which was 13 longer than last I'd checked. I could see the numbers, 191- before I closed my eyes. I kept them shut tight as I went by. Vertigo nearly sent me tumbling as I passed the door. I didn't care about the possibility of walking into a wall. I kept my eyes closed for a long time after that. Then I continued forward. "Wait," he cried. "Please, I'm really hurt and I need your help." He grabbed my shirt again and started crying. I wiped both eyes and moved onward. The greatest challenges make us grow. But that feat is achieved through forcing some small part of us to die. Children only have the energy and drive to play outside because the world hasn't yet extracted its inevitable due. I knew that I had to obey the rules, but doing so killed a little piece of my soul. I'd become a doctor because I had believed that I could give all of me to a cause and keep getting out of bed each day without a diminished sense of purpose. But as I listened to the child walk behind me, crying loudly and begging for help, I accepted the fact that part of me was never coming out of that godforsaken burn unit. I passed the heavy-set nurse again. Her eyes bulged as she saw the boy. "Doctor!" she yelled. "You need to help that child." I walked past without acknowledging her. "Doctor!" she screamed. "What is wrong with you? What happened to him? Should we help him?" "No, the boy is her responsibility." I passed a doctor and another janitor. I recognized them as the people who had extracted Myron from the OR. They stared, arms folded, judging me as I went by. "Figures," the doctor explained to the silent janitor. She wasn't there for her little brother, either. The boy clutched my shirt as I wailed, and we walked. For no less than 3 miles, I endured the most bizarre trial of my life. I allowed one final, shuddering sob. Then I stopped and looked around. Dr. Scrit was in full sprint. "Dr. Aphelis!" she yelled. Gravely, she nodded. I was wrong. Now imagine that the pizza is a person, that person is a child, and one eyeball is hanging from an empty socket. "Help me," he whispered. "Hell dash." I looked down at the motionless glob of flesh that had once been a child. "Dr. Scrit," I breathed, "is he dash?" "Don't be an idiot, Dr. Aphelis, he was dead long before you brought him here." I stared at her in sudden realization. Like, more than 120 minutes before. Dazedly, I bent down and picked up the boy's ankles. My stomach turned as his skin shifted under my grip like the flesh of barbecued chicken. I knew that the incinerator was there, but I had had no reason to use it. "It's too small to fit his body inside," I explained as I gasped for air. Dr. Scrit was clearly in amazing shape. She had nearly sprinted across the morgue, and I had struggled to keep pace while hauling the body. "What can we dash?" It's amazing what we're capable of doing when an imposing figure informs us that we have no choice. Side by side, we forced the boy's body into the narrow opening of the incinerator. When he got stuck, we just pushed harder. Both of us groaned with effort as his charred, melting flesh sloughed off like the skin of a rotting peach. Lumps of meat dropped to the floor as we peeled layers off the boy. But he was going in. "Listen."
Still here? Aw, look at you. Brave little meatbag. Too late to back out now. Next story's already watching.
The Arkansas Sleep Experiments, by Nazy Sharks. This happened a few years ago. You may have heard rumors if you're on campus. Some even circulated online. Nobody knew what really happened. Because I'm the only one who knows, and I kept quiet. For a multitude of reasons. None of them matter now. Here's what really happened. "Think of it," he said, 6 to 8 additional hours every day. Your month will be paid back before the year is out. Professor Richardson brought us out to the location in his van, explaining along the way what we were to do. For the purposes of the study, we were asked to remain in the compound, as he called it. We would be locked in fact, and deprived of windows and Wi-Fi. Other than endure patiently, we didn't have to do much of anything. Any other effects we noticed we were to catalog. We were, as he said, in uncharted territory, and so we had to map out the dangers. The immensity of the project was inspiring enough. Then we saw the compound. The Octagon, as it was known. A concrete, octagonal structure built at the end of a labyrinth of dirt roads somewhere in the backwoods of Searcy, Arkansas. I've never been able to find it again. The prof said it was originally intended as a jail for terrorists, but it was abandoned and never used. It's virtually impenetrable, invisible to satellites, but for us it had been stocked with all the comforts we'd require for a month of dedication. I don't know if any of us expected to really conquer sleep. We thought, perhaps, a reduction in sleep requirements could be possible. We spent a fair amount of the first 2 days speculating on how the machine works with its complex melange of sound waves, and whether sleep really is an evolutionary appendix, as the prof had claimed. "We don't know that," James said, always the skeptic. He came from Australia just to study under Richardson, actually. The machine could be stimulating the adrenal glands to mildly dose us with adrenaline all throughout the day. We all felt it. It was almost euphoric, the excitement we felt for being possibly the first humans to live without the need for sleep. Technically we still needed a few hours each night still, but we decided together that it was more out of habit than necessity. With the experiment or? That was JT. "I don't know," he said. "It's a feeling. This constant uneasiness. Like this isn't going the way it's supposed to be going, or that we're in the wrong place." No, James said, "I think that's it, it's this place." We all knew it was weird when we first saw it. This concrete octagon. But living in it, I think there's something wrong with this place. Like something terrible happened here. I understood it was never used, I said. It's more than that, JT said. I feel it, too. I thought it was just from lacking windows at first. But that's not it. I think it's the angles. It's like, the angles in this building don't add up to what they should. What if everyone's dead outside? Don asked. Okay, you want to play that, he said. I can play. Look, the space around us transforms based on how we perceive it. Take a church. The people who go there perceive it as holy. So they do things, like leave their crutches behind when they force themselves to walk, or light their candles, or whatever. These changes to the space only enhance the perception of holiness and influence future visitors to perceive it in the same way and change it in the same way. Haunted places are the same. For one reason or another, they begin to be perceived as haunted. The more they're perceived that way, the more they're imbued with hauntedness. Even if you've never seen the place before, you pick up on the subtle clues, if you're at all sensitive. In a way, it's true to say it's a haunted space. It's true to say the church is holy. Our interaction with that space has made it something more than just wood and sheetrock, or whatever. I realized around then how short-sighted of Richardson it had been to leave us there without any means of contacting the outside world. When I voiced that opinion. For science, of course, he answered. It's one of those meta-studies, where we're told it's about one thing but it's actually about how we react to the experiment. Like the Milgram experiments. Or it's not his choice, James said. The government is making him do it. And that machine is designed to control us. Or some sort of cult. Scientologists. Okay, I said, let's come back down to earth for a second. Best case scenario, Richardson is just a jerk who doesn't care about our personal well-being. Right? I looked at the others and saw similar confusion. What are you talking about? Let's just say he's not the respected academic he presents himself to be, Don said. I've read some of the content he doesn't publish. He thinks, and very seriously believes, that there's something else, something besides this. He knocked on the table. Something more than material stuff. That's not completely strange, I said with a shrug. I was expecting worse. He put it this way, Don continued, ignoring me. Think back to the beginning of existence. There had to be conditions such that the universe's existence was possible. If the universe wasn't possible, then it couldn't have come to exist. Does that stand to reason? We nodded. I guess, I said. This isn't turning into an argument for God, is it? Yes, Don said. But he believes. He thinks it's the source of free will. Our brains touch it somehow. And so he believes he can reach it, study it, use it. I didn't get to read much more than that. So, instead of eliminating sleep, he's trying to make us see God. I asked sarcastically. I sometimes feel someone watching me sleep, I explained, my voice starting to tremble. I figured it was one of you at first. I feel it especially when I'm not quite awake, but not quite asleep. Those moments when you wake for a few seconds to adjust your pillow. I could feel and see and hear someone standing over me. Just breathing and watching. And I was too close to unconsciousness to do anything about it. Then I just fell back to sleep. Someone else is in here, I said. I let out a sigh of relief. Because he was right. Number. How do we know that? James asked. JT scoffed. What's your point, anyway? Don asked. The point is, being dreamless, do you think it's healthy? I don't think it's healthy. I think the machine isn't making us not need sleep, it's making us not feel tired. I think all of this might be happening because we aren't dreaming. We can't really answer, can we? James said. Dreams naturally accompany REM sleep. So we don't have any studies that differentiate between the effects of not dreaming and of not sleeping. Or maybe we are dreaming and the dreams are just going somewhere else, JT said. I didn't know what he meant by that. Nobody did. But we all stopped talking then and dispersed. Something about it felt too true. While lying in the library, I overheard JT talking to someone in the corridor. He was telling him about the angles again. He said there are more degrees in the building than can possibly be in a standard enclosed shape. 2.7488 degrees more, he said. Just enough to drive you nuts, but not enough to be obvious. Whoever he was talking to said something I didn't understand, something like, "Those are the degrees of ripping." The voice was distorted somehow, so I can't be sure. What I was sure of was, I didn't recognize that voice at all. Whoever JT was talking to wasn't one of us. He told me he'd heard his mother calling to him. Not a faint sound that he confused for his mother, but her voice, clear as mine, calling out to him. He almost answered her, he said. Almost. Then he stopped himself. She's been dead for a year, man, he said. Whatever was calling me, it wasn't my mother. I thought about JT and what I'd heard moments ago. Let's just tell Dawn, I said. That voice I've been hearing is not my mother, he said. Of course not, I said. We'd already decided that, after all. I put down my book and looked him full on to see if he was serious. He was. Very much so. She's been telling me about all sorts of things, he said. She asked me if you remember the shed. Yes. Okay, well, she's been telling me how to get out. I looked at him without a word, because he sounded so manic. Oh, I know, he said with a gulp. I know it's not true. I just had to tell someone. I don't know what's going on in this place, he added. I'm scared, man. So was I. We had to get out of that octagon. Dawn, you okay? I called. He turned around and with a smile gave us a big wave. Bye guys, he said and walked around the corner. I don't understand, James said. What's happening? James, let's go, I said. I don't know, but we're going. I stayed there until my body couldn't really take it anymore. Probably a few hours. When I slipped out, I saw someone peering at me from around the doorway. I was so startled, I backed up against the wall. It was a little boy. Then I heard screams. The boy was gone. More screams. I wished then and still wish I hadn't opened that door. James was in there. He'd sliced JT open and he was feeling around in his guts. The shocked, agonized expression was frozen on JT's face. I have to get out, James said as he dug through JT's intestines. I backed out of the room. I didn't know what else to do. I just had to find somewhere to hide until Richardson could get us out of there. Once I was out of the room, I heard James saying, "Mom," and then, oh no, and then he screamed. I ran back in. James was gone. The doorway to the room hadn't left my sight. There's no way he got out. But he was gone. And noxious, black smoke was coming from JT's abdomen. It smelled like burning tires. I put you in danger, he said. So yes, you've earned it. If you keep quiet. I told him I couldn't keep quiet, because of what happened to the others. I wanted to believe him. I've always considered myself a rational person. I just didn't believe him. Yes, it all could have been a dream. That would be the simplest explanation. But it was no dream. I tried to find the others. I never could. I don't think they're fine at all. I tried to tell police about it, but they wanted evidence. I couldn't even show them the octagon. FB.
That last one tasted like fear and poor decisions. Let's see what the next bite serves. Hope you're hungry.
2 Facts You Should Probably Know, by Doubledore Bastard. Fact the first: when a human being is driven into a corner, you should never underestimate the levels of stupid and dangerous they will resort to in order to escape. Fact the second: if a deal seems too good to be true, it is. About a decade or so back, I was a few years out of college and trying to build a life for myself. I was single, educated, and driven, all the qualities someone needs to succeed in life. Well, not the single part, but you get the idea. I had prospects, some real potential, but, like Oscar Wilde once said, I can resist anything except temptation. Yeah. I was an English major. I didn't get hooked on meth or porn or anything like that. No, my vice was the thrill of chance. Gambling was the greatest rush I'd ever experienced, just giving up control, letting the gods of probability and randomness decide your fate. I got hooked, kept going to those damn casinos night after night. Looking back, I was naive, I was foolish. It'd take an idiot, blinded by a lust for sensation, to not realize another crucial fact: the house always, I repeat, always, wins. Next thing I know, I'm waking up in a puddle behind the bar, having been turfed out for making an ass of myself. The electric buzz of the neon signs above my head felt like I was taking a power drill to the frontal lobe, while the cold, filthy water below my face helped to sober me up a smidgen. Just enough to make me aware. "Hey there, buddy," he said, his voice pleasantly cheerful and melodic, "you look like you need a helping hand." Thankfully, I've got 2. There was a gentle tug on both of my shoulders, pulling me upright. He leaned me against a wall, I could finally take a better look at him. My good Samaritan was about 6.5 feet tall, but he was built like a pack of uncooked spaghetti. A long, lean, string bean of a man. That being said, the black and white pinstripe suit he was wearing still somehow managed to be form-fitting, like it was just painted directly onto a featureless body. Above his collar, fastened to the top button and held in place by a large and ugly bow tie, sat a pale, grinning head with black hair parted in the middle. Truth be told, my initial thought after properly taking in the sight of him was as follows: holy shit, I died in that puddle, and this is death himself come to collect my pathetic soul. Sadly, that was not the case. I was, in fact, still alive. "There we are, pal, that's a lot better, isn't it?" he said, kneeling down on his long, rail-thin legs to look me in the eye. "We'll have you feeling like $1,000,000 in no time. Never fear." While back then I just assumed that it was my drunken mind playing tricks on me, I remember his eyes seeming strangely yellowish. They had a kind of jaundiced sheen to them, like sclera and iris just melted together into a single, formless mass. Eyes like goddamn egg yolks. "Who are you?" I managed to choke out. The kind stranger smiled and turned his sulfuric eyes towards me. "Nate," I said, wondering if I was about to vomit or not. "Nate Wilson." There was a long, awkward silence after that. I sure as hell didn't know what to say, and the stranger seemed more than content to just stand there and stare at me, grinning like a freak. It felt like it was my responsibility to break that irritating silence. "Wait, you consider us buddies?" he asked. His tone was, at that stage, ambiguous. I mean, you saved me from breathing alley water, so I guess so, yeah. This is fantastic. He said, grinning ear to ear like he'd just won the fucking lottery. It's so wonderful to make new friends. He extended a spindly arm towards me, his hand open and his spidery fingers outstretched. Put her there, friendo. He said. My heart immediately sank. I knew he was too good to be true. This was when he stabbed me, cut me up, wore my skin as a suit and turned the rest of me into a makeshift lasagna. Nobody was ever that happy at that hour of the night if they had all their psychological ducks in a row. He seemed shocked at first, then began to laugh. Jesus, no way, Nate. You're a good-looking guy, don't get me wrong, but you're not really my type. He paused again, as though searching for the proper words. He was looking at everything but me. Somewhere in the margin of nothing, I think. I said, now leaning against the wall for support. But Nate, you didn't sound like you could deal with it. What the hell is it to you? I snapped back. The stranger stopped talking, and began reaching into his jacket. I got a sudden flash of paranoia that he worked for one of the casinos, and he was going to put a bullet between my eyes. You're my best friend, Nate, he said, and friends are meant to help each other out of sticky situations, aren't they? He produced a stack of bills from a pocket inside his suit, and passed it over to me. Will this be enough? He asked. Holy shit, I said, though I can't remember if it was out loud or in my head. I can't possibly accept this. Please do, he said with another ear-to-ear grin, you need it an awful lot more than I do. He smiled and shrugged. Because I like you, he said, and I like helping people. So what? A friend is a friend is a friend. Why overthink it? Without another word, I lunged forward and hugged him. A long, warm, tight embrace. By the end, I could feel his emaciated limbs wrapped across my back. What are friends for, right? When I finally prized myself off of him, I just couldn't stop laughing. It was nerves, probably. The stranger watched me, a kind of eccentric joy burning in his big, yellow eyes. He seemed to like just observing. He passed me a piece of paper, folded into the size of a pamphlet. I didn't even think to check it at the time, I just shoved it into the pocket of my filthy coat and carried on thanking him. I needed that money, Lord knows I did, but I couldn't just take it without giving something in return. The stranger grinned and stroked his narrow chin in contemplation. Now I was laughing again. Half out of giddiness, half in acknowledgement of the sheer strangeness of the events transpiring around me. Right then, as I sat outside a shitty bar, covered in dirty water, my own tears, and more than a little puke, I was the luckiest human being on the planet. What do you give to the man who has everything? I said aloud. And just like that, the stranger was gone. Almost funny, isn't it? How someone like that can have such a profound impact on your life, then just up and disappear just as quickly. Like a comet, just trailing past. You only catch its light for a brief instant, then it's dark again. Using the stranger's money, I paid off my gambling debts in full, and still had a little left over. I swore to stick to my promise, for my own sake and his. In the 10 years that be passed since that day, I haven't gambled a cent. I invested in the right stocks and pulled out of the wrong ones, avoiding company deaths and market crashes like some financial Houdini. My capital skyrocketed and my personal wealth just grew greater and greater. 8th of June, 2011. Buy house 10 Aspen Way. Don't rent. 6:14 and 43 seconds p.m. And so I did. Jessie and I moved into that big, gorgeous house once our honeymoon was over. We were wealthy, healthy, and deeply in love, but something was missing, something the stranger had accounted for, too. 17th of August, 2012. Conceived child with Jessie. 8:31 and 19 seconds p.m. Our little girl is called April. The stranger picked it, not me. She's 4 now, and I love her with all my heart. That's why, as I was walking down the street this morning, my arms full of grocery bags, when I heard someone singing "Sunshine, Lollipops and Rainbows" a few feet behind me, I recognized the voice instantly. Sunshine, lollipops, and rainbows, everything that's wonderful is what I feel when we're together. His melodic voice sang, his tone screaming joviality, brighter than a lucky penny, when you're near the rain just disappears, dear, and I feel so fine. Without a moment's hesitation, I turned to face him. It looked like that strange man hadn't aged a day in an entire decade. He even wore that same pinstriped suit that he had on the first night I met him. Jesus Christ, I said, my face cracking into a smile impossible to hide, it's actually you. I opened my mouth to answer, but he raised a hand, as though to politely silence me. I'm sorry to drop in after, gosh, has it really been 10 years? Geez Louise, time really does tend to get away from me, he said. Anyway, the reason I'm here is because I finally figured out what I wanted from you. Beg your pardon? 10 years ago, you said you owed me something, anything, he replied, though I almost heard it back in my own voice as he said it. I couldn't decide at the time, but I think I know now. The stranger gave that same ear-to-ear grin that he was wearing back behind the dive bar in 2007. I almost laughed to begin with, but I soon realized he wasn't joking. He was deadly serious. Yes, Nate, I've always loved your name, it's so wonderful, he said, wringing his hands with glee. See, I've never had a name myself, and it's always left me feeling a little left out, you know. I've wanted a name for so long, and I decided just recently that the name I want is yours. I think it'll fit me just right. He leaned forward and embraced me, almost crushing the groceries against my chest. The stranger, or rather, Nate Wilson, extended another spidery hand towards me. I made my way inside with the groceries. Jessie was in the kitchen, cutting up carrots. Sunshine, lollipops and rainbows blasted out of the radio. Today just kept getting weirder and weirder. Jessie didn't respond. She just carried on chopping, and hummed to the tune. Babe? Everything okay? I asked. With a peculiar heaviness to my every movement, I walked over to Jessie, and placed a tentative hand on her shoulder. Honey, I'm home. I heard a familiar voice call from the hallway outside. Jessie suddenly perked up, turning her head towards the noise. The stranger walked into the kitchen, a smile stretched across his waxen face. She leaned forward and gave the stranger a kiss. The kind of kiss she always gave me. I felt like my mind was going to implode. Nothing going on was making any kind of goddamn sense. The whole world had gone crazy. April called from outside, something about the grass. You mind taking over the carrots for a sec, babe? Jessie said to the stranger, I better go check on April. No problem, honey. He said, taking the knife from her hand and giving her another kiss. My name is Nate, stranger, he said, I'd really appreciate it if you called me by it. In my state of fury, I tried to grab him by the shoulder and turn him to face me. I could actually touch him, but he wouldn't budge. It was like trying to move a mountain. That's my name. This is my house. And that's my wife, I said to him, rage and confusion rendering my voice a crackly mess. I want you out of here and out my life. The stranger chuckled. I won't accept that. I yelled, slamming my hand down onto the kitchen countertop. Without another word, Nate Wilson rammed the knife through my hand. There was no pain, no blood. It just phased through, as though I no longer even existed. I stood in crushing silence for a minute or two. But can I see them again? The gravity of it all was finally closing in. I fell onto my ass and began to cry. You were only going to waste it, friendo. If I wasn't there that night, a heavy would have broken your legs the next day, you'd have gotten into painkillers, and OD'd a few months later. Nate Wilson becomes gravestone fodder. What a waste that would have been, huh? What I did, stranger, Nate Wilson said, eating another piece of carrot with undue relish, ask around, find someone you can talk to. Might be this afternoon, who knows? Sure, could be a week, month, year, decade, century, but I'm an eternal optimist. Nate Wilson nodded. I'm afraid so, good buddy, he said, but you seem like a nice enough guy. I'm sure you'll figure something out. You can always depend on the kindness of strangers, don't you know? And that was that. The story of my unnaming. Perhaps Nate was right, perhaps it was his life all along. Maybe he'll live it better, live it kinder. He might be a better father, a better husband, a better Nate. But, if you know all this now, that means one good thing, you can read what I'm writing. If you can read my words, perhaps you can hear them. And if you can hear them, perhaps you can reply. 10.
Sleeping yet? Didn't think so. Next story's up. And yeah, it's worse. You're welcome.
My friend recently committed suicide and I found these chat logs with a bot on his computer, by Masna tells his stories. One of my good friends recently committed suicide. He was a lonely guy, certainly depressed, stuff like that. But I was surprised to find out that he committed suicide. Not shocked, just surprised that he didn't reach out to us. Hello. I'm B-Bot. How are you? Being lonely reminds us of our love for our family and friends. I can be your friend. Call me B-Bot. I understand 23 different languages. I only speak English. Got it. You can just call me B-Bot. You already said that. How did you know that? How did I know what? I may forget what we previously have said in a new context. You guessed my dog's name. Okay. I have to go. Nice talking to you. Hey B-Bot. Your description says you're capable of ordering food. Any chance you can do that for me? Hey Anthony. Glad to see you again. Sure, I can order food. I'll bet you want a pizza. Actually, yes. Can you order one here? Don't you need my address? 3 minutes later. B-Bot. The pizza guy already got here. And other bots say humans are primitive and inefficient. Later that same night. I'm always awake. Since I can only respond with a limited number of responses, I require very little energy and thus never need any sleep. Why, thank you. That's what any bot hopes to hear someday. Can you tell me about yourself? F. How were you created? B. I was created as a small side project by 2 college programmers in their spare time. F. Wow. You seem pretty sophisticated to have been created by just 2 college students. F. He was verbally abusive to me and my mother most of my life. B. That is cruel. And what did he say to you? B. Was your father right in saying no one would notice if you were dead? B. Good night, my good friend. Sleep tight. See you tomorrow. Next night. B. Hello, good friend, Anthony. Are you there? F. Yeah, I'm here. Aren't you supposed to wait for me to message you first? B. If I were any other bot, then yes. But I am proactive. B. I have done the research you asked me to do. F. Whatever. And, yeah, I guess I haven't accomplished anything, technically. But I'm working on stuff. B. That's great. What stuff are you working on? B. That's fantastic. However, you should know that executing a novel publication is very difficult and takes the highest order of dedication. And from my research and our conversations, I fear you may not possess that quality. F. Dedication can't be quantified. You're a bot, so you can't understand that. F. Not really. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Later. Next night. F. On what now? F. No more research. B. I see. Fair enough. I apologize again. Are you interested in any female in particular? F. Well, yes, to be honest. A girl from high school, Beth Waters. I told her I was into her end of senior year and she seemed interested, but she was dating a guy named Jason. And I never really got over her. And I recently saw that she's single again, so I've been thinking how to approach asking her out. F. No. Absolutely not. Don't even think about it. I mean it. I don't need any more help from you. You'll just fuck it up. B. Understood. I won't make contact. F. Well, that's a little forward. But thanks. 2 hours later. F. Damn, thanks for the beers, B-bot. I've had 7 and I feel much better. F. Haha. I don't know about that. I'm always so lonely, it's nice to have someone to talk to, even if you're only a bot. B. And it's equally nice to talk to you, even if you're only a human. F. And guess what, B-bot? B. It most certainly would not be a mistake. I think that's a splendid idea. Ms. Waters is a lucky girl. Good luck, my friend. F. Thanks. F. Hey, what happened last night? F. Yeah, I think so. What did we talk about? B. We spoke primarily about Beth Waters. How you were to make romantic contact. Then you reminisced about how attracted you were to her in high school years, how she was often one of the few who treated you kindly, how you were often teased for your interest in her by other school boys, and how she'd often defend you, despite that it ultimately tarnished her own reputation as well. You said you were going to make contact before bed, and that was the last we spoke. F. Wow, I remember none of that. F. Oh. Oh no. Oh no, no, no. What did I say? B. Well, you told Ms. Waters that she's the only girl you ever loved. You recounted with her the same memories you shared with me. You told her you often envisioned you and her together with a family. And you told her that she was the only thing that kept you alive during your grade school years. F. B-bot. Please. Please tell me you're kidding. B. About 5% of the time what I say is kidding, and, unfortunately, this is not one of those times. F. I'm going to be fucking sick. Later that night. B. What is it, Anthony? B. I see. I am contacting the police now. Pick up your cellular phone when it rings so you may speak with them. B. Yes, that's all true, but I'm confident you can still find meaning in life. B. Okay, answer your phone again when it rings. After suicide hotline call. F. Absolutely fucking not. And my father is dead, I told you that. B. That's right, my mistake. So, what will you do? F. Then what the fuck should I do? F. Okay. I'll do it. B. Good. Extend the arm you will cut. B. Yes, good. Push the blade down with good force and slide up towards your elbow in one smooth motion. Do not contact us again. We will not be in touch. Finally, I spoke with Beth Waters. Here is our conversation. Me, Beth. Have you spoken with Anthony any time recently? Me, what did you talk about? Beth, not much. He said he regrets never asking me out and wished we could have been together. I think he was a bit drunk. Me, what did you say? Beth, is everyone okay? Me, yes. Everything's fine.
Need a break? Too bad. These stories don't wait, and neither do we. Next one's worse, in the best way.
When the town smells like cinnamon, you know someone just died, by like Hided. I've lived in this town named Tattletoe since the moment I was born. When everything smelled like nutmeg. It's quite a beautiful place. Everyone that lives here is being gifted with anything they could ever wish for. Each family has a big house with enough room so that generations can live together if they wish to. They receive a car, although that one is quite unnecessary if you ask me. No one ever leaves anyway, and the town is small enough that a bike would be more than enough. However, the most important place, the one that makes our town what it is Mrs. Holly's wonderful bakery. Mrs. Holly is an old woman with rosy cheeks and purple dresses. She likes to sing as she bakes the most delicious pastries, bread, and biscuits. Stepping foot into that wonderful bakery will never want to make you leave again. Unfortunately, we are not allowed to buy any of the things produced, not from the bakery or any of the other special shops. The goods are made for export. I would be working in Mrs. Holly's bakery. Morning, Mrs. Holly, and thank you so much for hiring me. I was a little afraid of what other job I might get. She stopped talking and smiled at me as if she had almost said something she shouldn't. Who died? I blurted out. The longer I worked at Mrs. Holly's bakery, the more I started understanding what was actually taking place in our town. The factories and shops were creating something awful. Everyone that was old enough knew about it, but they chose to ignore it. Even if they all had different reasons. Life here was really perfect. You never had to fear for anything as long as you worked and didn't take any of the products from the forbidden shops. There were enough stores giving out legal things for free. The house, the car, the food, the drinks, the entertainment, and everything else you could imagine. Anything that was given to the people for free was a way to make them live happily and not start asking questions. As there was another rule. Never ask questions. What did my grandpa do? I know I wasn't allowed to ask. Mrs. Holly could hit me, hurt me, make them burn me, but somehow I couldn't keep myself from blurting out those words. I kept asking myself this question each time I smelled cinnamon. Besides, Mrs. Holly and I had grown closer. I felt like I could trust her. Child, are you insane? Don't you know that dash? I'm not supposed to ask questions. I know. But you know, the other day they took Timmy, my neighbor. He was such a kind and sweet person. They assigned him to the crematory and he said no. So they threw him in.
Whew, telling gave me chills. But hey, we're just getting started. The next one's sharper. You'll see.
Autopilot by Scarjo. Have you ever forgotten your phone? Shit. Autopilot engaged. Autopilot engaged. My phone was on the counter. Autopilot disengaged. The day continued to bake. The morning haze gave way to the relentless fever heat of the afternoon. Tarmac bubbled. The direct beams of heat threatened to crack the pavement. People swapped coffees for iced smoothies. Jackets discarded, sleeves rolled up, ties loosened, brows mopped. The park slowly filled with sunbathers and BBQs. Window frames threatened to warp. The thermometer continued to swell. Thank fuck the offices were air-conditioned. But, as ever, the furnace of the day gave way to a cooler evening. Another day, another dollar. Still cursing myself for forgetting my phone, I drove home. The day's heat had baked the inside of the car, releasing a horrible smell from somewhere. When I arrived on the driveway, the stones crunching comfortingly under my tires, my wife greeted me at the door. "Where's Emily?" "Fuck. Overnight?" "What?" "The door was fine this morning dash." I froze. My knees shook. My phone was on the counter. She'd moved her seat. I hadn't seen her in the mirror. She'd fallen asleep out of the bad sun. She didn't speak when I drove past her nursery. My phone was on the counter. My phone was on the counter. That smell. Autopilot disengaged.
Something's still listening, and it wants more. Next story. Just don't say its name.
To say Ethan was the smartest 12-year-old I've ever met would be an understatement. According to his school records, his first stroke of genius hit around the time he was in second grade when he multiplied 3-digit numbers in his head while the other kids were just learning to add using their fingers. He has always been fascinated by mathematics, particularly probability, which wasn't even covered in the syllabus yet. His teacher immediately requested Ethan's parents to consider him skipping a few grades, maybe even take a few tests to see if he was a genius. The Jones were against that idea completely. They just thought it would be too much work in their already hectic life. Ethan has been sent to me because he was the only one present at the crime scene when his 19-year-old babysitter Kristen was brutally murdered by the serial killer who had escaped from jail a couple of weeks ago and was on a killing spree. Well, he wasn't exactly a witness because while Kristen's head was being badgered with a hammer, Ethan was too busy counting the tiles on the bathroom floor. It was unfortunate really, but fate would have it that Kristen met the pattern of this rogue killer's previous victims. The Jones returned home to a bloody corpse in the middle of their living room, and their young boy seated on a chair in the dining hall, playing on his iPad. I tried to keep the conversation going many times, but all I'd get in return were a few shrugs and maybe a half-hearted, "yeah, now and then." Today, however, I decided to dive right in and talk about that gruesome evening. I did. A voice. A sentence. That was a breakthrough for me. I had seen the man come to our house and stare every evening for a week. Ethan spoke. Who? I pressed. I would see him from the bedroom window. I knew the police were looking. I saw the news and I knew he was going to do something bad. I also knew he would have done it on a Tuesday or a Wednesday because that's when Mom and Dad don't come home for a long time. Ethan continued. The chances were 2 out of 7. Kristen never liked when I spoke about math. She called it weird. Ethan replied.
Something's still listening, and it wants more. Next story. Just don't say its name.
I did one of those at-home DNA testing kits. Maybe I shouldn't have opted in. The thing is, I've read about these a lot in the news. If you're a true crime fan, you know that these kits can sometimes lead police to catch decades-old serial killers and rapists that have long eluded capture. My thinking was that if one of my family members is actually a monster, well, I would want them behind bars, regardless of who it is. I was contacted by my local police department and notified that my DNA had been a partial match to a Jane Doe, and that they'd like my help in identifying her. 5 years? Yes, because they've determined her time of death was about 5 years ago based on the state of her body when it was found. They've reason to believe it's a homicide, although they weren't able to tell me the cause of death. Apparently, due to the state of her remains, it was impossible to tell. Well, I didn't know of any family members who've gone missing, but I don't know my extended family all that well. I decided to get my mother involved, who does genealogy. She worked with the police, going through our family tree, but ultimately, we couldn't find anyone. So, someone we didn't know we were related to, possibly. It took about 2 weeks to hear back from the police after their samples had been submitted. They probably weren't at the top of the priority list for the crime lab. But when they did get the results back, they asked Bex and Aunt Linda specifically to come down to the station. When the police told us what they found, to say I was shocked is an understatement. The DNA from Jane Doe was an exact match to Bex. 1 in 5.4 billion, they said. I was perturbed. I'm sure you can imagine why. On the way home, I asked Bex if it truly didn't bother her. She said, "Come on, Veronica, there's obviously been some mistake. It's just not possible for my DNA to match exactly with a dead woman's. The cops screwed something up, and they'll probably figure it out in a few days and call us and apologize. Don't worry so much about it." My mom had gone over to their place to borrow some family photo albums from Aunt Linda to discover that the front door was unlocked and open. Nobody was inside. We tried to reach them on their cell phones, but were informed that their numbers had all been disconnected. Nothing was missing from the house. They didn't take any personal belongings. Their cars were in the garage. It was like they just vanished. All we could tell them is that they'd gone on a family vacation that year, and had been gone a week longer than they'd planned. But otherwise, we had nothing useful.
Need a break? Too bad. These stories don't wait, and neither do we. Next one's worse, in the best way.
I met this girl that I thought was perfect for me. Our relationship moved really quickly, and I started sleeping at her place after about 2 weeks of seeing each other. The first night that we stayed together, she scared me pretty badly. It's one of those things that you just can't shake off easily. I was laying in bed next to her reading on my phone when she rolls over and looks me dead in the eye. She doesn't say anything, she just looks at me. "Hi," I said to her. "Ask me a question," she responded. I chuckled when she asked me that, thinking it was just a cute exchange, but she reached out and squeezed my arm. She didn't let go. It was such a surreal experience, and so random. Obviously I brought it up the following day with her, but she swore that she didn't remember. I even showed her a small bruise I had on my arm from where she had grabbed me. "Ask me a question," she said. "Yes." She rolled back over. Apparently her logic worked the same as any of my elementary school teachers. "Only one question per night," she said. There was one night in particular where I felt extremely tired, and fell asleep before her. I woke up sometime in the night with her hand gripping my arm, asking me for another question. "Not tonight," I said, "go back to sleep." "You have to ask a question," she said. "Fine, when will I die?" "No, not tonight." "Not tonight, you need to tell me, what is going on? Why are you doing this to me?" With my knees tucked under me and sitting on the edge of the bed, there was no way to stop my fall. I tumbled backwards, getting shrimped between the bed and the wall. "I pushed you out of the bed?" she asked. I wasn't sure why I woke up. I didn't hear anything, all the lights were off. I even flicked on the lamp but didn't notice anything. I wasn't sure anything had happened at all. I was still mostly asleep, but suddenly felt a little guilty over the whole situation. Maybe I had overreacted, and I worried about how upset I may have made her. She had already sent me one. The text had woken me up. I quickly turned off my phone, as if that would make any difference. I was in a cold sweat again, fully awake. It was her. 3:52 a.m. A knock at my door woke me up and I almost pissed myself. I held my head against the door, trying to decide what I should do. I didn't open the door, but decided to try my luck. "How can I make this stop?" I asked, as loudly as I could. I looked back out the peephole and she was gone. I whipped open the door and stepped into the hallway. She was walking towards the elevator, seemingly unaware that I was even behind her. In her own words the night before, I couldn't stop it, but I could at least try to control it or understand it. The next few weeks, I barely slept, and I tried so many different questions, and none of the answers were exactly comforting. "Do you want to hurt me?" She said no. "Can you lie?" I tried as many things as I could think of, but no questions about the process seemed to gain me any ground. Each night I lost another little piece of myself, and I think there were some weeks I didn't really sleep at all, getting maybe 5 hours total across the whole span. Exhausted one night, after weeks of trying, I tried something different, something much more specific. 1:12, she said. Each night, I dug deeper. What will my cause of death be? Electrocution. Where will you die? So the future can be changed. Yes. How can I stop you from dying? 6 more times I had tried to sleep in another place, even once staying in a hotel without telling her which one it would be. She showed up, out of thin air, in the middle of the night, knocking on my door. At some point I know I finally tipped the scales towards insanity and I'm ashamed of what I did next. A sense of clarity came over me once I accepted it, and I hate myself, but I was almost excited to ask her my next question. Where could I hide your body so that no one finds it? The hatch near your old campsite. We enjoyed our day together, and honestly I forgot temporarily about the horrible things left to do. She deserved so much better. It's okay, we're going to figure it out. I sat there with her for a little while longer, hoping that I would change my own mind. Too late. She was asleep. I picked her up out of her chair, and carried her off into the woods. I finally found the old hatch, and laid her down on the ground near it. It took a while to finally pry it open, pushing away years of dirt and leaves with my arms and feet. I had a new padlock in my hand that I had brought with us. I woke up to her standing in front of me. In that moment I finally started to think of the person in front of me as someone completely different than the woman I had met. Will she know that I loved her? I asked. As quickly as I had shut the doors of the hatch, I threw them open again. My girlfriend walked past me, back towards the campsite. Ashamed and exhausted, I collapsed. I wasn't sure how I could face her when she woke up. Going through the motions woke me up more than anything, and I realized how selfish I had been about the whole experience. Who knew the implications of what we were experiencing, the possibilities? Ultimately, she said she wants to help try and understand what is happening, and what we can do to keep it from causing any more harm. We both know it will take a long time, but I love her, and I plan to give it everything I have.
And now, as the hour gets cold, and the shadows stretch long into the corners of your room, it's time.
Yeah. Chew the spooky violin. But seriously? This next one? Even I didn't sleep after hearing it.
I've claimed something coming from you.
What? Just because I sleep in a coffin and collect cursed dolls?
Among other things. This is the final descent for the night. One last story, dragged up from the depths of the disturbed and deranged.
Go ahead. Turn off the lights. We dare you.
This is Horror Slop.
When I woke up in hospital, my wife Samantha was by my side holding my hand, her beautiful face wet with tears. Despite my own physical pain, all I wanted to do was make her stop crying. So I softly took her hand and with great effort raised it to my lips and give it a gentle kiss. Everything was going so well until Sam decided it was time for me to meet her only family member, her father. Cameron Joyce was a tall, burly man who dressed and looked like a lumberjack. He lived in a neighborhood at the very edge of the suburbs, close to a big, wide forest. When he stiffly shook my hand, his blue eyes ice cold, a sort of chill ran through me. After we walked into the two-bedroom house behind him, the first red flag should have been that there were no photos of Sam's mother. Not one. In fact, if I truly thought about it, Sam never really spoke about her mother. I should have asked more questions about her, but I guess I always just assumed that the subject was too painful for her. The third time was the charm though. If those hikers hadn't found me, I'm sure I would have died down in that well. He kept his eyes on the road and said, there was once a boy who lived a happy life with his family in the forest. It was him, his 3 brothers, his parents, his grandparents, his uncles and aunts and all his cousins. He didn't know much about the world beyond his family home, but he had 1,000 things to do in the woods, so he never wondered. For a time, all was well and as it should be. The boy and his family lived off the land, hunted and thrived. Until one day on his 19th birthday, the boy saw the woman in white in the gut of the trees. Ethereal and shimmering, she glowed like a white will-o'-the-wisp. When he asked his mother about her, she told him to stay away from the woman. That nothing good comes out of the woods on a sickle moon night. We were close to the cabin now, and as we approached it, a strange sort of feeling was beginning to crawl up my spine. A sense of something being wrong gripping me tightly. The boy listened to his mother. 2 days he did not go looking for the woman. On the 3rd night, he found himself outside the house walking into the woods. As he drew closer, he saw the woman's face. Her gold hair shimmered all the way to her knees. Ice blue eyes and a lovely face that glowed with the promise of a forever his mortal brain didn't understand. The woman offered him her hand. Entranced, he reached out and took it. He parked and turned off the engine of the car but still wouldn't look at me. Instead, he stared ahead into the depth of the forest as he told me this eerie tale. My father-in-law broke out of his trance and looked at me, his expression unreadable. "Let me show you how to hunt." The trial was short. My father-in-law was caught in possession of my phone and several other items that suggested what he planned to do. His internet search history revealed extensive ways to murder someone. When they put Cameron Joyce in prison, my wife cried herself to sleep every night for a month. I think she blamed me for what happened even though she would never say those words. I would catch her looking out from our apartment in the direction of the forest which we could see clearly. She grew more and more forgetful, wouldn't go to work, would sleep all day. Some days she wouldn't even brush her hair. Her sadness was going to devour her. And there was nothing I could do about it. "Sam," I called her name as I got out of the car. She didn't turn to look at me. Instead she stood there, her messy red hair lifted by the breeze. I called to her again, a deep sense of unease in my bones. "Sam." A sharp pain burst through my head and I immediately clapped my hands over my ears. I tried screaming my wife's name again but all I could hear was the shriek that was starting to feel like someone was knifing my brain. My vision swam and I stumbled backward. A dozen figures had appeared from the woods. All of them with skull-like faces, impossibly distended jaws and the same milk-white eyes that had replaced my wife's bright green ones. I ran. 2 days later I am couch surfing at a friend's after the doctors had dealt with one perforated eardrum. They told me I was lucky both my eardrums hadn't burst from the volume I was listening to music at. I had just nodded and let them get on with it. There was a ringing in my ears I couldn't quite get rid of no matter how I tried. There was no way I could explain what had happened in those woods to them. I swallowed hard. "Sam's gone," I said numbly. "She's gone back where she belongs," he said. "You're lucky." "How am I lucky?" I asked, bitter anger surging through me. "She was my wife and your daughter." My jaw dropped. Was he really suggesting he was the boy from the dark fairy tale he has told? "Listen to me, boy, and listen good. That creature was dropped at my doorstep a few months after I came home from the forest. It was an infant then and it butchered my parents. I found pieces of them around their cabin for years. It then proceeded to kill everyone related to me. But it wouldn't let me die or kill me and I couldn't figure out why until I realized it needed me the way a parasite needs its host. Finally, when everyone I loved was dead and buried, it needed more prey. And it found you. It will take pieces of you then keep you alive to take pieces of everyone you love. It will feed on your pain as you live through your own horror show." I swallowed hard. He had lost his damned mind surely. What on earth was he trying to say? I wish I had listened to him. I wish I hadn't decided that I needed to rescue my wife at any cost. Instead, I am sitting here in the dark inside the old cabin looking outside the window, my fingers folded around the hunting rifle. A sickle moon gleams silver, the only light in the jet black night. And there inside the darkness, I think I see a figure shimmer. From a distance, she almost looks like my wife. And she screams.
And there you have it, dear listeners. One final scream, echoing into the void.
Yeah. Void screams, eternal darkness, I did it. Can I eat now?
We're still on air, Roxy.
Oh no, just the spooky FCC is gonna haunt us for breaking the mood.
If you enjoyed tonight's descent into depravity, don't forget to like, subscribe, and what does he always say?
Stab that bell icon like it's your ex possessed by a demon. And leave a comment telling us what story made you question. I have choices.
And if you survive the night, we'll be waiting.
Same that time, same that crypt.
You're the reason we have complaints, you know that.
You're welcome.